Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku woke up a century later and found out All for One was his father? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. According to historian Ejiri Shinsui in his newest book War and Art in the First Age of Quirks, Captain Kamino was a man full of mysteries. No one knows where he came from, who he was, or how he disappeared. All we know about him is through the posters and banners people made of him during the dawn of Quirks. It makes it hard to study him from an objective standpoint, as you can't really separate what is fact from fiction. Blood trickled down his forehead. In a flash he wiped it away, eyes laser-focused on the task at hand. His gloved fingertips moved across the computer, trying to find a USB port to plug in his thumb drive. Careful, his mind warned. Guilt gripped his stomach. He couldn't believe he actually did it. No, actually he could. It wasn't the first time he had rushed into danger, nor, he suspected, would it be his last. He couldn't help his hands from trembling. Why couldn't he calm down? He recalled the old English adage of Murphy's Law and how conveniently it would apply to this situation. What a mess. Most teenagers didn't sneak onto military jets in the middle of the Arctic to foil an anti-meta supremacist plot. However, Izuku Midoriya wasn't most teenagers. And the next few seconds proved that point. "Oi!" a guard barked, stumbling into the room. His boots echoed across the metal flooring. "Intruder!" Someone call for backup. "What the hell are you?" He didn't give the soldier a chance to finish his sentence, shield already smacking against the other's head with a sickening thump. The vibranium hummed in turn, his weapon bouncing back to his awaiting arms. As predicted, the guard fell sideways, joining his compatriots who tried to intrude upon Izuku's last-ditch effort to save his home. Seconds felt like hours as he waited for another. Hearing none, he continued his work. The controls should be right under there. He released a sigh of relief as the program downloaded into their system. One by one each computer screen was taken over, the virus spreading across every portion of the facilities like a virus. His shoulders sagged. Metaphors were not his forte. That, or he was exhausted. Probably the latter, since he really needed a break. Sadly, the work of Japan's #1 terrorist did not come with vacation days. He flexed his fingers, breathing in and out to regulate his heartbeat. He was nervous, terrified even, but they were one step closer to their goal. He felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing someone like him could be of use for a noble goal. His earpiece buzzed, shaking him from his line of thought. "I can't believe you did it," a familiar voice rasped. He could hear a plethora of tapping noises, as the man used all four hands to continue working on hacking into the facility's main system. "Cameras are down. You should be able to head to the engine room now without much interference." Izuku laughed. "I know, right? I mean, I always knew Tachi-san's techno-quirk would be good for electronic sabotage, but the way Honda-san was able to merge his tech with her hacker quirk was a brilliant strategy." "I'm sorry, but quirk?" "Oh, that's what Mom used to call meta abilities. Anyways, where was I?" "Right, the techno and hacker quirks. Both are really versatile in use. If only we could combine it with someone with some sort of radio wave quirk, then perhaps." "I thought I told you to stay at their base," a deeper voice than the last remarked. Izuku's shoulders rose at his father's ire. There wasn't any time to escape. "I did what was necessary," he explained. "I am the one who determines what is necessary. Not you." His head ducked. Okay, so he was really angry then. However, his father's tone changed, the fiery anger replaced with a cold, calculating one. "I understand when circumstances change. Focus on the primary mission. We cannot afford to lose here. Use any means necessary to achieve the objective." "Understood, sir." His mouth clicked shut. Sweat beaded his brow. He was almost there. Couldn't get overconfident, could he? He shook his head. No, of course not. As he remembered his past training, his back straightened, adrenaline starting to pump through his veins. This was a matter of life and death. The cause was above all else. His father had drilled that into him since birth. He couldn't fail them now. Hooking his shield back in place, he hurried down the small corridor. Cold recycled air hit his cheeks. He could feel the plane take a sharp turn, strong winds throttling the exterior. The turbulence would have shaken a normal man off balance, but not him. Two guards shouted in alarm at his approach. Before they could reach for their guns, Izuku reacted. He ran forward, body spinning around to launch his shield like a discus, releasing it with deadly force at the incoming enemies. The shield knocked the first one in the chest before vaulting to the opposite side of the small hall, giving Izuku just enough time to catch the second off guard. His fist collided with the other's chin, the jaw breaking against the force of his knuckles. The man sprawled to the ground, knocked out cold. Izuku sighed. Almost there. His breathing hitched as his focus returned to the first guard, who had recovered and proceeded to stare him down. A feral smirk broke out on the man's face as he growled, "Any last words, freak?" "Yes." His eyes flickered to the side. "Duck." The man's face twisted in confusion only to turn around as Izuku's trusty shield hit him into next week. With cartoon-like theatrics, his body fell over, stiff as a log. His face smacked against the cold steel floor with a hard thump. Izuku clenched his fist, a rush of confidence following through him. All he had to do now was knock out the pilots, and he would have his first successful solo mission. What was that about not much interference? He mumbled into his mouthpiece. "Get going," was all he received in turn. Carefully stepping over the unconscious guards, he continued forward, trying to focus on the task at hand. If only his hands would stop shaking. It wasn't the first time someone threatened his life, but looking down the end of a gun left him a tad rattled. What if he really had died? What if he had accidentally killed one of the men? Technically, he was authorized to do so, but the boy had never actually taken a life like his father's men had. His brows crossed. Would this be the day he did? Would he have to put his morals below the mission? Would it? He shook his head. This wasn't the time to get another anxiety attack. His father wouldn't have given him this role if he couldn't handle it, Izuku assured himself. Besides, he was built for this sort of work. The serum made sure of that. The chill of the cockpit sent a shiver down his spine. The advanced nature of the plane spoke of a wealthy patron, and going by the design, it would be an easy guess as to who supported the organization. Governments from around the world had been cracking down on all quirk holders with brutal efficiency. Sure, their stand in Kamino had been successful, but the rest of the world wasn't so lucky. Tokyo, New York, Paris, Hong Kong, his teeth ground together. If only he could be of more help. If only they had more help. But no one wanted to help the quirked. Not at the risk of losing their lives or their loved ones. A soft click drew Izuku's attention to his left. He barely had enough time to bring his shield up, the bullets grazing off as the metal absorbed the blows. His heartbeat quickened as the man of the hour appeared. Just his luck. What once was a normal man in his 40s had been deformed by the very thing that brought Izuku back from the brink of death. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he examined the skeletal face. Sunken eyes glinted like coal. Though his expression was desperate, his movements spoke of military training, which put Izuku at a distinct disadvantage. He heard someone curse through the comm link before it shut off. He didn't need their help to figure out who the man-made monster was before him, however. Phantom Skull. His mind screamed at him to run. He wasn't ready for this. As his uncle would say, it was akin to meeting the final boss in the middle of the game. "Captain Kamino, is it?" Skull drawled. "You've made quite a name for yourself." He laughed, a mocking sort of sound that left Izuku feeling empty and afraid. "And what sort of mutant are you?" The kind who's going to stop you," Izuku countered. It was almost poetic irony that the symbol of the quirked his father so carefully crafted to further their cause was, in reality, a quirkless teenager. The man began to cross the room. Izuku tensed up. The propaganda posters don't really do you justice all that much, do they? For one, you're a lot shorter than I expected. Panic began to cluster in his abdomen. Keep calm, he inwardly chanted. He hadn't expected to meet the leader of the anti-quirk organization so soon. A lump developed in his throat. Between the man's fierce gaze and heavy presence, it gave little room for the teen to breathe. But you live with someone even more terrifying, his inner voice reminded. And if you fail? Izuku adjusted his shield, not rising to the man's comment. Please stand down, sir. This doesn't have to end in a genocide. He barked a laugh, raising his gun once more. Sir. He calls me sir. Oh, you're a polite one, aren't you? His gait shifted. Izuku tensed. But it will. It always does. History has shown us that. You and the rest of your kind will kill us humans. It is an inevitable process. We are only reacting in kind. That's not true, Izuku tried to argue. We are all humans. Quirk or no quirk, we all have hopes and dreams. He stepped forward in spite of his fear. I won't let you step on them. 3 more bullets hit his shield, ricocheting off into the cockpit's hardware. Lights flickered. Smoke began to overtake the cabin. Not good. Right as Skull was about to shoot, Izuku barreled forward, knocking the gun to the floor. Quick thinking and a sharp kick opened the emergency door, flooding the cabin with freezing winds. Something in the back of his head itched. This situation was off somehow. His gaze flickered to the controls. The virus should be in command now, but the plane hadn't changed altitude. The bombs were still on target. The man clapped in a mocking manner, backing away all the while. Such a hero. It's a shame you're on the wrong side. What did you do? Izuku yelled. The airplane started to elevate. Izuku barely reacted in time to the man's punch, the knuckles grazing his cheek. Unfortunately, he didn't see the other hand. A sharp pain flared in his diaphragm, the sucker punch to his stomach throwing him against the machinery. He gasped for air and flinched. Broken rib. Maybe 2. He really wasn't prepared for this. He could feel the hot breath of his attacker above him, trying to find an opening to exploit. It wasn't hard. Despite Izuku's months of harsh training, Phantom Skull had decades on him, and it showed. He grabbed the teen's arm, flipping him on his back before jamming his shield upwards, cutting off his oxygen supply. You think your little party trick could stop us? The man leered. The place where his nose once was scrunched up in contempt. No, Izuku coughed as he lifted a finger. But he will. It was a big gamble, but the bluff paid off. Phantom Skull would have expected him to bring up backup on something like this, which, technically, was true if things hadn't panned out as they did. The split second the other looked behind gave Izuku just enough time to kick his legs from out under him. Air filled his lungs, and not a second too soon. The plane tilted carried them further upwards, wires and everything not bolted to the floor getting SED out of the open door, including the man. Izuku jumped into action. Stretching out his arm as far as it could go, he reached out for the other. The man might be despicable, but no one deserved to die. His mother taught him that. Grab on, he shouted above the howling wind. I'll pull you up. For a moment, he thought the man's eyes widened, but the expression smoothed over, replaced with a cold glare and a frosty smile to match. Alas, he began, loosening his hold. You can't save everyone, Captain. Time seemed to move in slow motion as he let go, despite Izuku's protests, vanishing into the white frost. Izuku could feel his heart thumping wildly inside his chest, the only source of warmth in this frigid place. That man, if only Izuku had reached out further. But no, he didn't want to be saved. Izuku blinked. Focus, he told himself. The plane wasn't slowing down, which meant the missiles were still on target. His blood ran cold, which meant their original plan had failed. Izuku dragged himself to what he presumed was the control panel. It took a few minutes to strap himself into the chair, his fingers too shaky to buckle in properly, but once settled he tried to reconnect with home base once more. Come on, come on. He played with the comm piece until he finally got that familiar buzz, breaking through the interference. Yes. Come in. This is Izuku Midoriya, codename Captain Kamino. Do you hear me? Hello. He held his breath as he awaited the reply. As the seconds dragged on, he felt a deep weight grow in his chest. What if they couldn't reach him? He almost kissed the floor when he finally received something. What did I tell you about that ridiculous nickname? His father chided. I never should have allowed your uncle to give you those comics. Honestly. It was hard to read his father's voice at times, but Izuku could detect the concern beneath the annoyance. His bottom lip trembled. It made this all the hardest. If he hadn't, I wouldn't be who I am today, Izuku answered as cheerfully as he could. He liked his lips, trying to find the words. He didn't have much time. Dad. I'm sorry. I know after losing him it was really difficult for you and that's why you got angry so much and… What are your coordinates, Izuku? His father interrupted. And why isn't the plane turning around? He could hear his father chastise their resident hacker. He laughed nervously, hands drumming across the control wheel. That's kind of the reason I'm calling you right now. His father sighed across the line. You never make things simple, do you? His teeth clicked together, though out of nerves or the cold he wasn't sure. Disabling the autopilot feature was pretty easy to figure out at least. Landing was another matter, however. He wanted to laugh. All his life he'd thought he would be done in by a cough. Now look at him. Do you remember when you asked me what quirk I wanted when I grew up? He asked. His father paused. He must have sensed something was wrong, or perhaps he heard it in the teen's voice. Hisashi Midoriya always was an expert at reading people. Izuku, this isn't the time to… Said I wasn't sure, he continued. Well, I was sure. I've always wanted to fly. Or breath fire. Maybe both. Think of the applications. I'd probably burn myself actually. His vision blurred. It was hard to keep control of the aircraft as it descended from the skies. All his life he'd wanted a quirk. A power to call his own. How he wished he could pull things towards himself like his mom had or give and take quirks like his dad. And there were so many wonderful quirks out there too. He loved being able to analyze new members' abilities, how their powers worked with their bodies. Part of him had been envious. But he understood now what he had to do. I'll give you whatever you want, boy. Home. His father ground out. Izuku could hear his teeth click together on the other side of the comm link. I wish there was more time to tell you everything. Frost clung to the windows, snow pelting against it as the plane headed straight for the sea. A pang of guilt hit him as he remembered the other men on the flight he had knocked out. They were going down with him, weren't they? A loud crash on the other line resounded. There is time, Izuku. No, there isn't. This plane is moving too fast and it's heading straight for Japan. He swallowed the bile in the back of his throat. Don't be foolish. Tell Uncle whenever he gets out of the hospital that I love him a lot and that I really like those new comics he sent me last time. They really were good. He'd read them backwards and forwards more times than he could count. It had been his guilty pleasure between missions and training. Free time under his father was heavily regulated and Izuku savored every moment of it. Tell him yourself, the man growled, no longer upholding the pretense of a calm, collected leader. Don't be an idiot. He bit down on his inner cheek, trying to think of a response. If I wait any longer, a lot of people will die, quirk and quirkless alike. I can't allow that to happen. Well, he technically could, but that wasn't the kind of person Izuku was. I don't care about… It's heading straight for your location, he interjected. Self-preservation above all else. It was something his father taught him since he could crawl. He snorted. Like mother, like son it seemed. He rubbed at his eyes. Some captain he was. Dad? You still there? Izuku inquired after a few seconds of silence. I am. The answer was surprisingly subdued for the man. He hiccuped, voice cracking. Remember when M made me Katsudon on my birthday? Another pause. We'll have Katsudon when you get home, his father replied softly. I'll have one of my subordinates make it fresh, just as she would. He tried to imagine it, savoring the image before it disappeared from his mind's eye. I might need a rain check on that Katsudon, Dad, he chuckled. White clouds broke away, revealing black waves that stretched endlessly. The frozen winds seemed to grow fiercer now, cutting into his skin like… You are not allowed to die. I forbid it, the man said, as if his words could prevent the outcome. Once upon a time he might have believed that. Living in his father's shadow for so many years lent itself to that. Love and fear were powerful influences after all. But Izuku wasn't that sickly little boy who followed his father's every word anymore. Nor was he the faithful little freedom fighter for the quirked, hiding as one of them under the shiny veneer of a super soldier serum. You know, he started. It's not really your choice anymore, is it? He released a bitter laugh. He was just a 15-year-old boy about to die. His thoughts accelerated. There was no coming back from this. Wasn't his life supposed to flash before his eyes? Shouldn't he feel relieved? He really didn't. He wasn't ready to go. He hadn't even had his first kiss yet. Izuku, there was emotion there now. Real emotion. It dug the knife of guilt deeper into the boy's chest. Don't go. Please. The sound of waves crashing against ice cuts through the winds. His fingers are numb with frostbite. His eyes are the only warm thing about him now, and that's because he was crying. He doesn't want to die. He really doesn't want to die. But he can't tell his dad that. Not now. I'm not going anywhere, he said, teeth pulling back into a bright, terrified smile. I'm going beyond, remember? For all the quirk and quirkless. For all our futures, I'm going to make that dream come true. Plus Ultra. Comic by Frit Luption. Here's a link to my Discord. Updated link, let me know if it runs out. I post a lot of my art and rough draft snippets from my fix there. Design concept for Captain Kamino Izuku Midoriya in the AU. The Kamino Accords were groundbreaking for their time PRD, says Professor Carlos Javier of Dartmouth's prestigious Quirk Studies program. It took pro-quirk rights parties in other countries years, if not decades, to come to an agreement regarding quirk holders' civil rights. But in Japan? It happened in a matter of months, and it's all thanks to one man. It's a shame there are no surviving interviews. I wonder what he would think of the world we live in now. Davidson, Aguirre Garcia. 2XXX, Quirked Television Series. Hollywood Su, PBS. Welcome Dr. Kyudai Garaki. Processing. Processing. Complete. File, documents, search, Project Kamino. Processing. Processing. Complete. Project Kamino. Journal entries, Dr. Kyudai Garaki. Enter password. Access granted. This is Dr. Garaki reporting in. Blasted computer broke again. We will have to invest in a new one. Not that it matters all too much in the grand scheme of things, I suppose. But enough about that. New changes are afoot. Exciting changes. Our leader name redacted has assigned me a new project. Top secret, classified to even the highest members of the organization, save myself of course. I don't know all the details yet. Subject discovered in the Arctic Circle. On initial observations, human man encased in a block of ice. When asked how he received such a specimen, name redacted said it had taken him centuries of searching. Very curious. What would drive name redacted to such lengths? But he has entrusted me with reviving the specimen. I cannot fail him now, especially with his promise to increase my quirk research funding exponentially. Dr. Garaki, subject, photo 2XXX. This is Dr. Kyudai Garaki, lead scientist of Project Kamino. Oh, I do so love the ring of that. Sounds so perfectly fitting. My extensive research has gained fruitful results. After a round of careful investigation, I was able to determine the subject to be male, approximate height of 166 centimeters and weight of around 63 kilograms, excluding ice. Japanese based on what physical features I can discern. Hard to gauge the rest of his appearance underneath his outfit. Speaking of that outfit, oh my. My old colleagues would be green with jealousy, or indigo as it was with Dr. Aoi. No confirmation as of yet, but I suspect we have a piece of history in our possession. My hands are shaking in excitement. Never would I have anticipated that this project would involve working on the body of Captain Kamino. Shorter than expected, but based on historical records, would seem around average for a Japanese man from that time PRD. No wonder name redacted has charged me with this task. It is an honor to be assigned on such a groundbreaking project. Think of what we could learn? His quirk has always been a mystery. Well, not for long. I cannot wait. This is Dr. Kyudai Garaki, lead scientist of Project Kamino once more. The ice is taking longer than anticipated to melt, so unable to perform any scans on the body. Visually, The specimen has no signs of decaying flesh, unable to even find signs of hypothermia within visible portions of skin. Further questions come up as to how he became trapped here, especially in as good of condition as he is. Curious. Unfortunately, name redacted has not given me much information. His increased visits to the lab are making my assistants weary. Honestly, they should feel honored to be graced with name redacted's very presence. They wouldn't even have jobs if it wasn't for him. Such ungrateful brats. But not to worry. If we figure out how to revive the patient, everything should go according to plan. Subject Photo 2XXX. R. PK 87. Dr. Kyudai Garaki again. Project Kamino is still underway and we have been grappling with some challenges during the revival process. Today's technology is not advanced enough to fully revive a human from a cryogenically frozen state. Other studies have suggested that it is possible for animals such as reptiles, worms, and amphibians to revive from such a state, but humans are another matter entirely. No current records in the registry on quirks for defrosting either. A pity. I've spoken to a few peers on the subject, but the evidence is not very forthcoming. Of yet, no human has been successfully revived. I deduce there is an 85% chance of destruction of tissue, blood vessels, and major organs if not done correctly. Still, that 15%. No, too high of a risk. I doubt name redacted would be very happy with me if the subject died. Though, I doubt I would be alive long enough to witness it. RTK 140. Dr. Garaki reporting in. After multiple rounds of research and testing, Project Kamino has been put on hold. Name redacted had ordered us to change facilities at the last minute to the opposite side of the country. We nearly lost the specimen to those med heroes. Not to worry, however. The subject is safe in our cooling room and documentation for the project has been recovered. Name redacted was very angry with my assistant's handling of the situation. I'm not so sure how long they will be around. Such a shame. I quite like the one who brought me my lattes every morning. Ongoing progress has been made on the thawing process, albeit slowly. The team has conducted 130 long and short-term cryogenics tests on 5 different animal species. All results have yielded inconclusive outcomes. Our next experiment will need to be done on a larger sample. Sensei, Dr. Garaki, Subject, Photo 2XXX. R. PK 237. Oh, I could kiss your feet name redacted. Who would have thought that Project Kamino could be so useful for quirk replication research? Sadly, the cryogenic experiments ended with none of the participants surviving, but no matter. We can try again with others. Their bodies will be used for future quirk modification and duplication studies. But enough about my babies. I've discovered something even more phenomenal. The specimen is still alive. It sounds crazy. Never in all my years as a scientist have I seen anything like this, but one of my assistants showed me the results. Minor activity found in the left hemisphere. Name redacted was quite pleased, though impatient with my progress as of late. He has been visiting more often as well. I wonder if we should install a small chair for him in that room with how long he stares at the subject. What is his interest in Captain Kamino? Does he intend to use him? I would so love to run a few additional experiments on the man, but at this point, the main priority is how to unthaw the subject safely. It's not as if we could erase all the ice crystals instantaneously. I will need to secure more specimens for further study. R. TK 314. I'm ecstatic to report another breakthrough. I never expected name redacted to find such a gifted child to aid us in our endeavor. The boy is quite young, but based on his abilities to disintegrate whatever he touches, we might be able to do something about the subject's frozen exterior. Name redacted has been bringing the child in with him on his weekly visits as well. I hope we will be able to experiment with his quirk. I would be remiss to miss an opportunity to learn more about this quirk and its practical applications. Art 402. I caught little Tamura in the cooling room again. He seems fond of hiding there. He keeps talking to the subject, bringing him little gifts. I almost feel bad for removing them, but I very much believe name redacted would kill me if something happened to Project Kamino. Remind me to report this to him immediately. Such childish behavior should not be tolerated in a research lab. We are making history, not babysitting. Shigaraki Tamura, subject, photo 2XXX. Artsy 403. This is Dr. Garaki. Name redacted has given that little BR boy special access to Project Kamino's room. Something about building a bond between them. I'm not sure how a child can build a relationship with a block of ice, but Sensei's word is law. We will need more assistance to make sure the boy doesn't destroy the facility during his visits. R. PK 471. Sensei has been defeated by All Might. I cannot believe it. The injuries are severe. Possible brain damage. His arms will need to be replaced. Extensive surgery and skin grafts required. I am unable to determine when I will be able to return to this project. His health is of utmost importance. I refuse to let him die. R. PK 645. Dr. Kyudai Garaki of Project Kamino reporting. I cannot believe how much time has passed since the last time I was able to make a solid report. I've been looking through these reports and reminiscing about the old days. Who would have thought this little side project Sensei gave me decades ago would be the key to my own research into artificial quirks? I almost want to cry tears of joy. Soon my children will join the world of the living. But I'm getting sidetracked. Years of preparation have led to this point. We can finally finish the ice removal process. Shigaraki-kun has had well over a decade to hone his power and to make progress with this work. Name redacted says he will also be on site for the extraction process should anything go wrong. This is a very delicate procedure. R. PK 646. Dr. Kyudai Garaki reporting. History has been made. Subject has been successfully thawed out. Body temperature has steadily increased to average without any interference. A thermal regulation quirk perhaps? We have hooked up the subject to Name redacted's old breathing apparatus, though I doubt we will need it for much longer. But those are not the most exciting parts. We were finally able to remove Captain Kamino's helmet. I nearly fell out of my chair at the sight. He's just a boy. Can you imagine it? A child leading an army of quirked users against the anti-quirkus. It's hard to take in. The Kamino Accords were all because of him. Quirk research wouldn't be what it is today without him. Those med stooges who call themselves heroes owe their entire existence to him. Dear me, I have so many questions I can't even think straight. What sort of quirk allowed him to sway an entire generation? Even my dear grandmother revered him. I remember all the old posters she had in her hallway. It is strange to think a young child started what became a revolution. I suspect Name redacted has more knowledge of the subject since he was there. Were they friends perhaps? I will have to ask him another time. He is currently in the captain's room. Judging by his body language and the boy's physical appearance, I suspect their bond might run deeper than a friendship. Subject, photo 2XXX. Artli 700. Dr. Garaki reporting in. I can't believe I'm saying this, but Captain Kamino is quirkless. Bone scans show the extra toe joint and DNA testing came back clear of any usual quirk indicators. This is disconcerting. How was he able to rise through the pro-quirk ranks so quickly? I suspect Name redacted had a hand in it. I have been piecing whatever information I can get from him into a database. I ran some blood work on the boy along with my last batch of blood from Name redacted. Genetic match. I can see now why he didn't want this getting out. The most powerful quirk holder having a quirkless son would have been quite the controversy. But why make the boy the center of attention? None of this adds up. R. PK 711. Dr. Garaki reporting. I have been able to do some further analysis and have pieced together a new hypothesis that is currently in the testing phase. After my initial confusion in regards to the mystery of how a quirkless boy became the face of a revolution, I received some key information from Sensei regarding a serum, as well as results from additional blood tests on the captain. I theorized that what the boy was injected acted like a particularly strong quirk. Amazing. A man-made quirk. Based on Sensei's own dealings with the creator, the serum's general properties were supposed to enhance and perfect physiology and mentality of the subject. It truly is a work of genius. A pity the creator died so soon after its creation. I am particularly interested in the serum's ability to accelerate healing. Since the attack, Sensei's health has improved over the past few years, but he is still in a precarious state. I am now working to see if the subject's blood may be the key to healing our leader or at least alleviating his worst ailments. I have already retrieved samples and will begin experimentation tonight. R. PK 715. Final report. The project has been officially declared a success. I will be closing this file soon to focus my full attention back to my baby's and name redacted's health. Transfusions between subject and name redacted have yielded immensely positive results. Increased lung capacity has resulted in Sensei breathing without the assistance of our main ventilator. I've hooked him up to a smaller mobile version for now. If things go as I expect, he will soon be able to breathe without one. In other news, Shigaraki-kun keeps sneaking into the subject's room during off hours. Says he wants to be the first one to see his little brother awake. He isn't the only one. Due to redacted, we will have to move our little lab back to Kamino as soon as possible. I inquired about using Kurogyri for the job, but apparently he is on a mission. Typical. The subject will be moved to the new location first via one of our procured ambulance. Overall progress has been positive, vital signs are improving daily. It is possible he will wake out of his coma soon, though when has yet to be determined. Sensei, Shigaraki Tamura, photo, 2XXX. File, shut down. Are you sure you want to shut down your computer? Shut down. Check out my Discord, updated link. Let me know when it runs out. Come on over if you'd like sneak peeks of upcoming chapters and/or artworks, or just me chilling around. When Captain Kamino throws his mighty shield, all those who chose to oppose his shield must yield. If he's lead to a fight and a duel is due, then the red and the black and the green'll come on through. When Captain Kamino throws his mighty shield. Island International Choir. Captain Kamino. Songs of Revolution. A compilation of 21st century music, Tsubaki Records, 21XX. He wasn't sure when he had lost consciousness or how long he had been out. All he knew was that he was waking up now, mind processing the minute things around him. A constant rhythmic beep kept him from drifting back to a dreamless sleep. His brows twitched, soon followed by his fingers, different parts of him starting to wake up. He blinked hazily, trying to comprehend the scene around him. His eyes rested on a small monitor to his left, the little lines keeping pace with his rising heartbeat. A pole holding 2 fluid bags sat to the side, the tubing leading down to his right hand. His fingers twitched. Familiar metal dinged under his touch. His shield lay against his chest, the light material covering his torso. It did little to alleviate his discomfort. Why was he in hospital? What happened to him? Oh shit, he's waking up, a voice whispered. Now, that definitely woke him up. Despite how heavy his body felt, he heaved upwards, sitting awkwardly as the numbness in his limbs lingered on. The room was small and cramped, barely fitting the 3 people occupying it. Adrenaline took over as he instinctively started to analyze the situation, noting details to try to understand his current predicament. Beeping? It was coming from the heart monitor. Someone was trying to keep him alive. For what purpose, though? An unstable flooring shook off the rest of the haze. An earthquake? No, something else. Not the hospital, then. His gaze flickered around, absorbing his surroundings in more detail. Ambulance, his mind provided, or at least something that looks like one. Where were they going? Too many questions crowded his mind. Super serum or not, he couldn't help the rising panic inside his chest. He bit down on his inner cheek, trying to stabilize himself with the pain. The 2 men were dressed in dark clothing that reminded Izuku all too much of the evil minions in his uncle's old comics, with black face masks and gloves to match. The hair on his neck stood up as one of the men stalked over. Someone go call the boss. Hurry, the other male said, waving his arms as if to placate the boy. Hey there, kiddo. Izuku's breath hitched, hands quickly traveling to his face. His mask. They knew his identity. He pulled his shield closer to him, putting a wall of protection between him and them. He tried to control his breathing, but there were too many things coming at him at once. The smell of antiseptic, The sight of various medical equipment around him, potential weapons, the feel of soft fabric against his chest, unfit for fighting, and he was overanalyzing again. The sensations didn't drown out the rest of his mind, however. In fact, it seemed to enhance its processing. Memories flashed through his thoughts. The bomb. The mission. A cold shiver traveled up his spine as he recalled his last moments. The machine's beeping intensified as his heart started to race. He quickly detached the wires, fight or flight instincts kicking in. The strangers didn't seem to notice his discomfort, one fumbling around with his phone while the earlier man waved one of his hands, the other reaching for something behind his back. Izuku's breathing hitched. He pulled the four-port out of his right hand, ignoring the spike of pain. "Whoa now. Everything's going to be all right. Now just sit there and—" On any normal, ordinary day, he would have let the man explain. After all, he was a reasonable person. But after having been knocked around, forced to drive an airplane into the Arctic, and believing he was very well and truly about to die at the young age of 15, well, suffice to say, the man's words did nothing to stop Izuku's incoming shield. The force of the throw wouldn't be enough to take the man down, not in his condition, so Izuku rolled out of the bed and onto his feet. Unsteady as he might be, his father's training was merciless for a reason. Grabbing a hold of the four-pole, he swung hard, knocking both men into the door. The car lurched, likely responding to Izuku's actions. Before the driver could come to a stop, however, Izuku picked up his shield once more. Blood pumped through his veins, muscles straining as he was thrown forward by the braking vehicle. Curling up, he took the impact onto his shield. Glass broke as the doors burst open. He jumped to his freedom. Sunlight assaulted his vision. He inwardly reprimanded himself for such a stupid move. Should have jumped after the car stopped, he thought, not before. He always did jump into things before thinking. Ha ha ha. Wow, maybe his uncle was right about him being a magnet for danger. Honestly, it was probably a family trait, now that he thought about it. Oh shoot, he was overthinking things again. He winced as the asphalt approached, bracing for impact. The screech was worse than nails on a chalkboard. He tried to minimize the amount of force on his body as much as possible, but even while the shield caught most of the damage, he still got mild road rash and what felt like a dislocated shoulder. He grit his teeth to keep from yelling. His left arm ached as he skidded down the line, past honking cars and screaming pedestrians. The second he came to a stop, he was back on his feet again, ignoring the burning sensation in his side and shoulder as he scanned the area for some sort of clue as to his location. He squinted. He wasn't used to this much natural light. Everyone around him appeared blurry and bright. Japanese voices clued him in on the country, much to his relief, though the accents were slightly off. Was he on one of the islands? They weren't thick like Osaka-ben or the melodic harsh tones of a Kansai-ben or any other regional accent he had come across. In fact, if Izuku were to be honest, it was like a conglomeration of multiple accents pressed into one. He blinked. He was probably just imagining it. His gaze traveled to the street signs as his vision began to clear, followed by the metro ones. Close to Tokyo then. Did the Japanese government still have that warrant for his arrest? He bit the inner part of his cheek. Probably, he thought morosely. The figure his father worked so hard to build up came with a reputation after all. He focused his attention back to the present. Somehow, he had survived the plane crash and been transported back here. Why in an ambulance though? So many questions and not enough answers. There he is. One of the men from earlier yelled. Izuku tensed. The pain in his arm intensified. He should fix that. Grabbing his dislocated arm, he jerked it back into the socket with a pained grunt. His father would probably admonish him for such a move, but it wasn't as if he had time to go to a hospital and get a doctor to do it. He flexed the limb, the pain lessening as more blood pumped through it. His two kidnappers seemed less than pleased at his escape. But at least they weren't shooting at him yet, so that was a plus. Hands up, they tried to approach. Just come quietly and no one has to get hurt. Izuku zeroed in on the last part. The hair on the back of his neck stood up as his body shifted, lowering to the ground. The men must have thought he was giving up, coming closer, directly into his range. Big mistake on their part. Calculating the distance, he spun, aiming his shield for the first man's chest. The kidnapper seemed to expect it this time, dropping low, only to meet Izuku's awaiting low kick. In spite of the growing sounds of the crowd, Izuku could hear the crack of the man's jaw against the ball of his foot. Not wanting to lose momentum, he hooked his arm around the man's neck, slamming him down so hard his head bounced against the pavement. Police sirens split through the area, drowning out the crowds. Izuku froze up. Not good. He had brought too much attention to himself. It was in this hesitance he didn't see the other man come up from behind. The Fanji Hell Kid. Sheet. Tanaka's down. He tightened his hold on Izuku's neck. Where the hell is Kagura with the van? Boss is gonna kill us if we don't get you back. Stop squirming. I'll stop squirming when you stop trying to kidnap me. Izuku retorted, smashing the palm of his hand into the man's covered nose. A sharp snap and a rush of curses drew a victorious smirk from the teen. He didn't have long to savor it, however. The voice carried through the area, drawing both assailant and victim's attention. This is the Kamino Police Department. Put your hands up. Seeing the opportunity for what it was, Izuku called back, Help! I'm being kidnapped. You little sheet, the man growled, not helping his case whatsoever. The crowds of people had turned into an active audience, camera phones flashing from every direction. Izuku tried to control his breathing, but it was kind of hard with the kidnapper's arms still around his neck. But Izuku had been in worse situations. Gathering all the energy in his body, he crouched and jerked sideways, pulling the man off of his feet and onto Izuku's back. Training took hold as he flipped forward, taking the man with him. The short time in the air was all Izuku needed to dislodge the man's forearm from his throat. Twisting the arm to his chest, he turned the flip into slam at the last moment, both adult and teen thrown apart by the force of it. Thankfully, he landed back on his feet, adrenaline keeping him from falling where he stood. His bones creaked, muscles burning with strain. He would normally be ready to go for another fight or two, but something held him back. He looked down at his hands. Surprise flashed over his features. His wrists were slimmer than he had remembered, as were the rest of his arms. He needn't look further, the message was clear. A ball of anxiety formed in the pit of his stomach, growing with every passing second. Exactly how long was he out for? The sounds of the people grew louder. He eyed the police vehicles wearily. The designs were different than he remembered. They had multiplied since he first noticed them, now coming down both sides of the road. To his astonishment, the van he was transported in was seized by several of the officers, one even taking the driver into a nearby cruiser. Did that mean the kidnappers weren't connected to them? Not government-related then. An anti-quirk organization, perhaps? Getting rid of Phantom Skull probably put him on more than one shit list, he realized. His fingers twitched, anxious to find his shield. A wave of relief flowed through him when he discovered that it was lodged into one of the nearby cars. The driver was less than enthused, his cheeks turning purple. It must be a trick of the light. Izuku mumbled a quick apology, his own face beet red as he yanked the shield out. I repeat, put your hands in the air. This is the Kamino Police Department. Wait, I'm in Kamino? He blurted out, the words finally processing. Izuku nearly dropped his shield. He was back in his hometown. Water gathered in his eyes. He eyed the buildings. Though he didn't recognize any of the storefronts, there was familiarity in the structures, the flavor of his home a sight for his tired eyes. How long has it been since he'd been back home? More tears developed. Too long. A small bubble of hope formed in his chest as he continued to survey the scene. Maybe his father or his uncle were around somewhere. But it's not like he has a phone or computer right now. Heck, he doesn't even have shoes on now that he thought about it. The hospital gown and thin pants were already torn and dirted by his escape. This is your last warning. Put your hands in the air and back away from the weapon. His gaze traveled back to the police. They weren't doing anything to stop him. In fact, now that he thought about it, he rubbed his eyes, blinking at the sight. He'd been so distracted by the fight that he hadn't actually perceived the people around him in much detail. Now, however, was a different story. He openly gaped. There were quirk users in police uniform. Quirk users. Several, actually. And the crowds had even more. His eyes floated over the group, in awe at the amount of powers around him. Mutant quirks, emitter quirks, transformation quirks. Gosh, he wanted to study each and every one of them. His hands ached for a pencil or pen or something to note down all the interesting powers before his eyes. He had never seen so many people in one place outside of the quirk rights rallies. And they were here, out in the open on the streets of Japan. His head began to spin. He grasped his hair, trying to find some semblance of sanity. Was this really his Kamino? Sweat trickled down his temple. The confusion of reality and the image in front of him had sent Izuku's already stressed mind into a frenzy. The serum didn't help matters either. It hadn't just enhanced his physical abilities, it also gave the jumpy teen an overload of anxiety issues to go with it. Downside of science, he supposed. There was always a cost. His eyes glazed over, no longer paying attention to the world around him. A giddy, lightheadedness squirmed in his head, filling him with silent giggles. This is all just some bizarre dream, he rationalized. I'm probably dying of hypothermia right now. It had to be. He almost didn't notice the policeman approaching, his tail flicking back and forth behind in what Izuku assumed to be fake friendliness. For a dream, he sure got a lot of details included. Even the fur on the police's face was smooth and defined. Easy. We don't want any trouble. How about you come down with us to the station? Izuku's gaze sharpened. Imaginary or not, going to any police station spelled trouble. I think I'll stay here, thank you very much, he answered politely. At least until he woke up from his dream. The feline policeman didn't appear amiable to his proposal sadly. You said you were kidnapped? I'm not sure what's going on, but you look. How about we at least get you some bandages? I've got a few in my car. If you'll just follow me. No thank you. I'll stay right here, Izuku stated, holding firm. He had seen enough quirk users spirited away by the authorities, never to return from the prisons they threw them into. No, Izuku would stay right here until he awoke. The cop's pupils turned to slits. Listen, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. His gaze lowered to Izuku's shield. Now come on, kid. Put down the shield. Izuku adjusted the straps on his shield as he kept eye contact with the man. You seem very kind, officer. Nikomata, he supplied. Officer Nikomata, he said brightly, taking a moment to enjoy the pun before giving a short but respectful bow. While I appreciate your offer, I'm afraid I will have to decline. I was afraid you would say that, he sighed, hand reaching for his belt. Izuku was faster. Using as little force as possible, he flung his shield directly into the man's solar plexus. The weapon returned to his hand just as the police officer collapsed, groaning in pain. As expected, the police did not take very kindly to his display of disobedience. Surround him! One yelled. No. Stop. I have this under control. Officer Nikomata said to no avail. Izuku didn't give them the chance. Acting fast, he took down 4 more before the fatigue began to catch up with his body. Frustration furrowed his brow. He had grown weaker since he was last awake. As he regulated his breathing, he casually leaned against his shield for support. His muscles ached, pain lancing up and down his form at the strain he placed on them. At least the officers learned their lesson. They talked amongst themselves, huddled together in small groups to plan their next course of action. Izuku strained to hear them. All he could get out was quirk law, vigilante, and public safety commission, which made absolutely zero sense to the tired teen. For a dream, this place was pretty vivid and detailed. He almost didn't notice the shadow that flickered across the ground. Almost. The increase in temperature definitely alerted him that something was off though. His body tensed. He eased the shield back onto his arm. The crowds of onlookers fell silent. I'll take it from here, officer, a deep voice announced from above. But this is our jurisdiction, one of the police officers argued through his megaphone. He seemed to want to continue based on his look of frustration, but one of his co-workers waved him off, shaking his head as if it were a fool's errand. The air shifted. Where once weary whispers floated through the area were now excited cheers, the mood of the people yo-yoing in a way that made Izuku nearly jerk back. Phones snapped pictures like crazy, the flashing lights irritating his eyes. Several in the group called something along the lines of, "in danger?" That didn't make him relieved in the slightest. If anything, his nerves went haywire. Izuku gulped, finally. Facing the newcomer. Bad idea. The man on fire seemed less than pleased with him. There was a severity in his features, the flames enhancing the appearance into something quite sinister. It was an amazing quirk, Izuku thought, amazing and terrifying. The way he glared down at the teen left him far more out of sorts than he had been minutes before. "I suggest you put down your toy, child," the flaming male shouted over the sound of the crowds, his voice strangely theatric, as if he were putting on a show for them. "Lest you want to feel my flames." Izuku froze up. For a dream, the heat from the flames felt pretty darn realistic. They liked at his face, drying off the sweat he'd accumulated. He wasn't the only one feeling it either. He noted the way people in the vicinity were taking off their jackets and rolling up their sleeves. How they remained unperturbed to the flying fireball, Izuku could not begin to fathom. It must be due to the dream. Normal people would run away at the sight, quirk users or not. "Don't make me repeat myself," the fiery man stated, voice clipped. "Someone come get this kid. I have better places to be. I apologize, but I'm not moving from this spot until I wake up," Izuku announced. That seemed to get the man's attention. His brows drew together, eyes squinting down in a way that didn't so much as strike fear in Izuku so much as create annoyance. It was the look his father gave him when he brought up pop culture. For a man who appeared to know everything, Hisashi Midoriya was surprisingly dense about what interested the teen. It was the reason why he connected so much better with his uncle. His heart panged at the thought of his family. He didn't let his emotions get the better of him just yet though. "I see," the man said, the words rolling off his tongue in a distasteful manner. "You think this is a dream." "Of course it is," Izuku started, hands moving on their own as he spoke. "You're a flaming man right in the middle of a busy street. Not only are you a dangerous fire hazard, no offense, you have a great quirk and I would love to study it, but you're also putting hundreds of people in danger by using your powers directly on top of us. Fire burns people. Outside of you, I guess. I'm guessing you have some sort of pyrokinesis to achieve both protection from the flames and that level of height from the ground. How much firepower do you need to put out to emulate flying? I'm guessing a lot. That's pretty dangerous, even out in the open. What if we were in an enclosed place? You would SCK up all the oxygen and kill everyone, you included. And on that note, none of these people can be real either. I mean, real-life police are not nearly so inept as to let a man with a fire quirk go around a city like this one. If this were real, you wouldn't be flying around so much as bound and gagged for acts of quirk terrorism. And... but I'm rambling, aren't I? He laughed sheepishly. The man's features seemed to darken with every word he said. Is that it? Is that all you have to say? Izuku pressed his index over his lip, thumb coming underneath his chin as he thought of what else to say to the dream man. He could comment on his ridiculous costume, obviously a conglomeration of superhero costumes Izuku liked to read. Flashy, over the top, dramatic, okay, he loved it. The regalia brought a warm smile to his lips. He wished his uncle were here to see this. It was quite Silver Age in his opinion. I think that's it, Izuku stated, nodding as he spoke. Yep, that's certainly what in the world are you doing? He narrowly dodged the man's punch, somersaulting to his feet so he could put distance between them. The street seemed to sizzle beneath the man's impact, asphalt bubbling in a way that made Izuku gulp. He could not risk getting hit with that. You said this was a dream, yes? A sliver of teeth appeared, giving the man a vicious smile. Well, I'm about to make it your worst nightmare. The licks of flame against his skin set him on edge. From the scent of burnt hair to the throbbing pain in his side, doubt began to spread across his mind as the temperature continued to rise. What if? It couldn't be. His brows drew together, breathing growing rapid, shallowing as panic took hold, more questions rising to the surface of his thoughts. Why hadn't he woke up yet? Why was this world so detailed and intricate? Aren't dreams supposed to end after a certain PRD? There was only one plausible answer. This wasn't a dream at all. This is real, Izuku whispered to no one but himself. He could feel his throat tightening, heart pounding so hard he could hear it. But how did he get here? What happened to him after he hit the ice? These thoughts and more circled through his mind, his dread sinking into his flesh and grasping his heart in a vice-like grip. Izuku in a breath, too terrified to speak. He needed to end this. Super serum or not, he was flammable. He wouldn't be able to grapple the man lest he want first-degree burns. Not that he really could with the sorry state his body was in right now. But his mind supplied, cutting through the panic, your shield isn't. Time wasn't on his side. The fiery man practically exploded from his landing site, hurtling toward the teen at breakneck speed. He wouldn't be able to dodge this. Izuku gritted his teeth. Planting his feet into the ground, he squared his shoulders, positioning his shield to protect his body. The impact nearly toppled him over. The vibranium sang so loudly Izuku thought his ears might pop, feeling the vibrations in his bones. His opponent seemed to feel it too, if his bleeding hand was any indication. There was an openly stunned look on the other's face, as if he couldn't believe his attack hadn't gone through. Izuku felt a pang of sympathy. Vibranium was the strongest metal in existence. Not even all of his father's enhancing type quirks could break the material. If it wasn't broken, it was at the very least sprained. I'm sorry, Izuku stated, rubbing the back of his neck. About the hand, that is. You might want to get that checked out. That seemed to infuriate the man even more. Who the hell are you? Oh, that was a very loaded question. According to some, he was a part of a terrorist organization hellbent on destroying Japanese society. To others, he was a protector, a symbol handcrafted by his father to promote quirk user equality. But to Izuku? I'm just a kid from Kamino, he supplied sheepishly. I suggest you stand down, sir. Is that a threat? He snarled. The stunned look faded, replaced with a serious glare. It struck Izuku that he had lost his element of surprise now. No, sir, he answered, readying his body for another go. A warning. The fire grew in intensity. Izuku had to step back a few meters, the ground growing too hot for his feet to handle. This battle couldn't go on forever. Izuku could only block for so long before his body gave out. He cast his thoughts toward the people around them. Concern crossed his features. They could be really hurt here. The other man probably knew that too, going by his sideways glance toward them. He watched as the male squared his features, no longer as emotive as earlier. He wasn't going to pull back this time, Izuku realized fearfully. The next punch would end this, which meant Izuku needed to act fast. He quickly analyzed the man for any open weaknesses he could exploit. It wasn't easy. He was fast and big, which gave Izuku little room to fight with. But big doesn't necessarily mean better, he thought. The taller man's back and shoulders worked as potential blind spots. The fire around his face and body could also pose to give him coverage too, which left Izuku with an insanely dumb plan that required a good deal of misdirection, a dose of flexibility, and a heavy helping of luck to win this. A feverish sort of determination overtook Izuku's features. He had gone into fights with worse odds. Give up now and no harm will come to you, the man stated, flexing his good hand. You can't keep this up forever. Are you kidding? Izuku bluffed, hoping his voice didn't betray his real emotions. The teenager shifted his gait, readying for what could either be his biggest success or his greatest failure. Also death. That was a possibility too, he reasoned. I could do this all day. One chance. He struggled to keep his legs from shaking. He wasn't sure whether it was due to exhaustion or fear or both. The flames spread across the area. The ground popped and hissed, the air taking on a mirage-like quality he only saw in the dog days of summer. The man's feet shifted. Izuku's eyes narrowed. As he lifted for takeoff, the teen did the same. Before the older man could react, Izuku broke off into a sprint. He counted the seconds as the man drew closer. Izuku readied his arm. Right as the man closed in, Izuku flint left. His opponent swerved to join him, just as Izuku had hoped he would. He did a half pirouette at the last moment, shield flung from his hand towards his enemy. The man smirked, dodging his throw by ducking beneath. His words seemed to sizzle as they came out of his mouth. "Is that it?" Izuku stayed silent, not wanting to hurt his luck as his shield made its way over to the true target. His trusty weapon rebounded off the street pole perfectly, heading towards its water hydrant target like a lover reuniting with their beloved. Or it was supposed to, in theory. Wasn't the trajectory a little too high? His eyes widened in horror. Oh no! The crack was audible. The thud more so. There was more than one gasp in the crowd now. Izuku rushed over to the man's side. Oh no. That wasn't supposed to hit there. Did he just kill someone? His hands burned as he rolled the man to his side. The heat from his body seemed to be easing at least. Izuku checked the man's head, wincing as he cast his eyes on the very prominent bump on the back of his head. Izuku really hoped he didn't kill this guy. He wanted to win, of course, but he hadn't gone into the fight to murder someone. That just wasn't his way. Except you did kill people, a dark part of his mind reminded. The plane wasn't empty when you hit the water. Tears formed. He wiped them away with the back of his hand, struggling to keep calm. He needed to check for life signs. Placing his hand beneath the man's nose, he felt a wave of relief as air came out. Still breathing. He checked the man's wrist and the side of his neck just to make sure. Steady heartbeat. Merely unconscious. Or brain dead, his mind supplied helpfully. He rose back onto shaky feet. Strange. He could have sworn he'd heard people around. The quietness was deafening. Izuku's stomach clenched at the sight of hundreds of people's attention suddenly directed toward him, wordless staring on in what Izuku could only describe as shell-shocked. His heart leaped into his mouth, thumping wildly like a scared rabbit as he tried to regain his composure. Like many things in Izuku's life, it did not work out. He looked down at the injured man before returning his gaze to the people once more. His cheeks reddened. Without his mask, he felt like an absolute nervous wreck and probably looked like it too. Here he was, knocking out the people's leader? Boss? None of this made sense. He wasn't sure of anything anymore. His emotions were all over the place as it was. He struggled to keep from having an anxiety attack, his breathing increasing as more people scrutinized him. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. "I'm sorry," he yelled, bowing mid-waist several times. "He's alive. I promise. I'm so sorry." And then he ran. Tension grew in his limbs and face as he fled the scene. The police gave chase, but Izuku was faster, his last spurt of adrenaline giving him the boost to evade them. He dodged, swerved, and flipped over obstacles until he no longer heard the shouts of the authorities and the sounds of the crowds. Soon, all he could feel was his body burning, muscles exerting themselves as his feet pounded against the pavement. The fight left him more exhausted than ever before. He hadn't been in this much pain since the day he received the serum. His feet throbbed, likely burned from the fire user's powers. The injuries he sustained would heal, he reasoned, but not for a while. Sirens rang in the distance. Izuku turned into an alleyway. Backstreets would give him some short reprieve from the chaos around him. Think, he inwardly chanted. Somehow, the world around him had drastically changed since he last woke up. There were more quirk users than ever before, more than he had seen in his entire life really. Did all the quirk users from around the world move to Kamino, or did a bunch of non-quirk users awaken as once? Neither theory held much water, but considering what he saw, there wasn't much else to rely on. The cars and buildings had a familiarity to them, but they were changed somewhat too, like slightly newer models than what existed before. He really wished he had some sort of communication link. Something to get in contact with his uncle or father or anyone in their group. If they were even in this strange new Kamino. His chest tightened. Blackness edged at the corner of his eyes as his anxiety attack grew. His body slowed, the sprint turning into a jog, then into a walk, then finally leaving him collapsed on the ground, the fuel he'd used earlier now gone, leaving behind his fears and tears. The palms of his hand were bloody and scratched up, stinging as he struggled to move. "Get up," his father's stern voice echoed inside his head, "get up and fight." But he was so tired. Every muscle burned and cramped as he tried to get back on his feet. It was useless. He slumped to the ground. His weakened body couldn't go any further. Fighting could wait. He needed to rest. Slowly, he inched toward one of the nearby alley walls. It wasn't his first choice. Lying next to a trash heap wasn't his idea of a good resting spot, but it was better than sitting out in the open. His body leaned against the structure, head knocking against the hard material. The smell of garbage irritated his nose. His breathing was still harsh, still quick, but he wasn't moving around as much now. Izuku tried to center himself. He looked up, trying to get his bearings straight. What he saw shook him down to his very core. His hands trembled, moving up his arms until his whole body moved. It was an inconspicuous thing, a small poster announcing the opening of a new store. The image faded some by the elements. But that wasn't what caught his attention. The date stood out against the background, black numbers outlined in red. He shook his head. Disbelief flooded his system. He looked around, trying to find a clue into this being all in his head. A glitch, a hole, something he could use to prove to himself that all this was fake. It had to be. His fingers brushed against paper. He glanced down. The newspaper seemed ordinary until he gave it a closer look. Images of quirk users covered the front page. The date was different, but it was in the same year as the poster. Izuku released a dry sob, tears prickling in his eyes. Realization dawned in the worst possible way. The future was now. Uncle, father, the members of their ragtag group, he was all that was left. What felt like just yesterday was now centuries in the past. How did this happen? His arms wrapped around his shield, anchoring him as his sobs shook his body. He didn't want to be here anymore. He wanted to go back to his family. But he couldn't. He was alone now. Truly alone. It scared him. He wanted to hear his uncle's dry laughter. He wanted to see the tired smiles of his compatriots after a long day of work. He wanted. Tears hit the back of his hand as his crying grew louder. He wanted to be saved from this nightmare. He almost didn't hear the footsteps, slowing as they closed in. His shoulders tightened as he cast his gaze upwards. And upwards. The sun's rays filtered through blonde locks, the rest highlighting the outline of his body. Izuku couldn't help but gape at the sight of blues, yellows, reds, and whites in the figure's costume. He was the epitome of every superhero Izuku read about, distilled down into its purest form. Awe passed over his features. There was so much warmth in the man's smile. It reminded him of Uncle. "Have no fear," the blond man began, voice carrying through the small alleyway. "It's all right now. Because I am." Instinct took over. The moment the shield slipped from his fingers, Izuku immediately regretted his actions. He didn't mean to do that. Sadly, the shot rang true, smacking against the tall man's face before careening down the alley, rolling on its side for several meters before falling on its face in a small puddle of water. Izuku waited for the punch to come. His body seized up, arms at the ready to defend his face and chest. Moments passed. When the hit didn't arrive, Izuku peered through the open gap between his arms. The black star of his shield stared back. His gaze traveled to the holder. Despite the bruise on his cheek, the man continued to smile as if Izuku hadn't swung his shield at him. "Here," was all he said, pressing the familiar vibranium metal into Izuku's awaiting hands. He lowered himself down to the teen's crumpled form, stretching out his hand. Not too close to make Izuku flinch away, but just enough that it told the boy of his intentions. It was the first time someone had given him the choice since he woke up into this strange new world. That meant something to the teen. It brought another stirring of tears to the teen's eyes. It wasn't out of grief or fear this time, however. He stared down at the offered hand. Taking it meant acknowledging the reality of his situation. That he was no longer in his own time. That the world he grew up in and the people he knew no longer existed. The selfish part of him didn't want that. He wanted to go back to the familiarity, despite its hardships. But he couldn't go back. There was only one path now, despite Izuku's wishes to the contrary. He swallowed back the bile, wiping the rest of his tears away with his forearm. His mind was made up when he first set eyes on the man. He reached out. Warm fingers encompassed his own. Check out my Discord for updates and art relating to Captain Kamino and my other house. Or just chill out with me while I write? Time and time again humanity has put down those with powers they considered dangerous, volatile, villainous. Not so long ago they even slaughtered us for our meta powers. And now they seek to control us? Ridiculous. We must rise above those government dogs and show the world that we are here. We will not be silenced. We will not go away into the dark because of how we were born. Our dear captain showed us the way, so now we must go beyond. Now we must be the ones who embody what it truly means to be plus ultra. Yatsubashi, Chikara. Meta Liberation War. Osaka. Mushy Publishers 2XXX. Check out the Discord for more tweets. His followers tried to reason with him. Reka Todoroki, one of the captain's most trusted members, published a collection of his writings during this PRD, a recollection of discrimination and hope, wherein a letter sent to the captain on March 21st, 3 days before the Great Panic in Tokyo. To summarize, he stated that it was too dangerous for the captain to meet with the meta users in that area. What they needed, he argued, was to let the Tokyo meta users fend for themselves while they reorganized back in Yokohama. Captain Kamino's response was sharp. I see people in need and a way to use my power for their sake. In a world looking less and less human, who will stand up for the meta users? Shigaraki, H. The Rise of Meta Powers in the 21st Century. Kamino Quarterly, Volume 40, Number 2, 20XX, pages 50. Yagi hadn't spent the last few decades merely punching villains and saving people from burning buildings. Hero work involved more than what most people would expect. His friendship with Detective Tsukachi helped him hone that part of himself even further. While he was no officer of the law, he knew more than most pros about gaining information. Take reading people, for example. Everyone had little tells. For some, it was in their voice, but for the majority of people, it was in the eyes, a physiological throwback to when their ancestors needed to seek the nearest possible escape route, be it from foe or some dangerous animal. Blinking, looking in a certain direction, how long one might close their eyes. Yagi knew them all. He had seen it on villains and civilians alike. Young Midoriya was no exception. Discomfort lined his red-rimmed gaze, eyes constantly shifting about from the door and window in the private hospital room as if to map his best exits should things go south. His gray hair initially made Yagi think the boy was older until he got a full look at the large eyes and baby fat clinging to his cheeks. A wave of concern flooded through him at the sight. Very young. Probably not even a high schooler yet. Did his parents know about what happened? A somber thought ran through his mind. Did the boy even have parents? The child's digits fidgeted, curling around the corners of his shield. Though the paint was chipped, the metal below shined like an oil spill, little bits of color flickering off the silver metal beneath the artificial lighting. For a replica, it was quite beautiful. His eyes lit up at the sight. How nostalgic. Yagi used to have one of his own as a child, albeit much smaller and made of plastic. His lips pulled up in amusement as the boy continued to hold onto the cosplay item like a child with a teddy bear. It packed a punch, bruising his cheek from where the boy used it. Must be one of the expensive versions. A darker voice in his mind whispered something else, however. If something like that were able to hurt him, then his powers must be weakening faster than he thought. Or perhaps not. He was still able to keep up his transformation and could probably do so for a few more hours. A feeling of intuition was tugging at his gut, a familiar friend since he started heroics. Yes, despite his happy face, his insides were another story altogether. His gut feeling was rarely wrong. Many villains had been stopped due to this sixth sense of his. Not that the boy was a villain, but everything about the teen was off somehow. Yagi wasn't sure how to describe it. Young Midoriya seemed out of place, even in the hospital bed. Yagi at first chalked it up to the boy's odd accent. It reminded him of how his great-grandmother used to speak, a lyrical sort of Japanese he heard more commonly in the countryside, but not quite. It was hearing an old movie come to life. A few seconds later he adjusted his posture, leaning against the wall so as to put less pressure on his side. It helped alleviate the pain, if only for a moment. Transforming into his all-might appearance had steadily declined in time since his fight with his jaw clenched. No, he wouldn't dwell on that now. Not when this boy needed him. He focused his attention back to the child. Perhaps it was the mystery of it all. A top-level pro-hero taken out by a seemingly innocent, if rather confused young man was no laughing matter. The teen's moves spoke of military or martial arts training, though his body did not seem to match. He was thin and lean in ways that made Yagi anxious, hands itching to get the poor kid something to eat. It didn't deter from the evidence of young Midoriya's musculature, however. The boy could kill a man with his bare hands if need be, especially if he had an enhancement quirk. His gaze drifted to the window as his thoughts took a darker turn. Though the sky was blue, it felt as if the room had grown darker and colder. There were rumors, unconfirmed of course, but still, hushed whispers between a few fellow heroes that the Commission had been taking children in and training them up into high positions of heroics. Not that any of them had much room to judge. Hero school started training at the age of 15 or 16 after all. But he was getting off topic. There were 1,000,001 questions in Yagi's mind, all equally important. First things first, however, the kid needed something to eat. When he inquired what the boy would like, he received a ducked head, cheeks blossoming into a vivid red as the teen sputters. "Are you sure?" "Not to worry, young man. What would you like me to get you? You look like you haven't eaten in days." He laughed heartily. The boy cast his eyes at the floor with an air of melancholy as he mumbled, "More like centuries." Yagi blinked. That was an interesting expression. "Pardon?" "Ah." He waved his hands frantically. "You're right. Food would be nice. Though you really don't have to." The boy's growling stomach begged to differ. Young Midoriya covered his face. The small knot of suspicion in his stomach began to ease, if only slightly. For someone who defeated Endeavor, the child was surprisingly shy and awkward. He wouldn't have thought they were the same person had he not watched the video of the fight. Nonsense. He moved his fist into his chest, grin stretching even wider. "I am here for you, young Midoriya. Whatever you need." Whatever he needed indeed. The request was for quite a lot of food. Yagi would later think on his way to the nearest fast food franchise, but perhaps he was merely underestimating the portions a growing young man could eat. Still, 10 hamburgers, 3 fries, and a milkshake did seem like a lot. But no matter. He could give away the rest if need be. The trip to and around took longer than expected, his friend already there when he'd returned. He waved at Detective Tsukachi from a distance, the younger male standing idly by the hospital's entrance. It took Yagi a moment to gain the man's attention, possibly due to his civilian gear, but more likely because of his current physical appearance. "Detective," he called out, adjusting his hold on the bags of food in his arms. "I wasn't expecting you to get here so quickly." His old friend almost reached out, but pulled away, much to Yagi's relief. Out of all the things he hated to be seen as, an invalid was near the top of the list. The awkwardness passed soon enough, Tsukachi falling into step with him as they entered. "I was in the area," the shorter man mentioned offhandedly, though they both knew that wasn't true. The sweat on his brow told Yagi all he needed to know. "I can't say I'm surprised you were the one who found him." His lips turned up fondly. "You've always had a knack of finding people." Yagi shrugged. "All I did was ask around." It's amazing how far he got with the burns on his feet. His brows furrowed slightly at the state he'd found the kid in. Young Midoriya had obviously been through a lot today. Despite his meek demeanor, there was a guarded vulnerability behind the teen's face. He had seen that expression several times before with trauma victims. Nonetheless, this could all be conjecture. Yagi wasn't a professional psychologist after all. Probably some sort of augmentation quirk, Tsukachi surmised. "You got a name yet?" "Izuku Midoriya. And before you ask, I already checked with the quirk registry. There's nothing on him," Yagi stated, shoulders slumping. He suspected there would be anything in the boy's birth records either. It was as if the teen had merely popped into existence. Tsukachi sighed. "A false name then?" "Not necessary," Yagi said after a pause, the tightening returning once more to his chest. "That's why I asked you to come. You can get to the truth of the matter. And I wanted to keep things discreet. You're the symbol of peace." Tsukachi released a small chuckle, taking off his hat to run a hand through his dark hair. Nothing you do is discreet. I'm surprised the media hasn't been tipped off to your location yet. It was Yagi's turn to laugh. He lifted a finger to his lips, replying, I have my ways, detective. You'll find many hospitals respect the privacy of who comes through their doors unless there's a warrant. There was another reason he'd chosen this particular hospital as well, but he didn't feel the need to vocalize it to the man. The detective already knew about One for All and his true form. It wouldn't take him long to connect the dots. The detective folded his hands together, expression taking a darker turn. Speaking of warrants, the boy has one outstanding already. His gaze flickered upwards to Yagi's. Any reason why you didn't just relinquish him to the Yokohama's authorities instead of pulling one from Tokyo? This isn't like you. Rescuing crazed vigilantes and bringing them junk food isn't your style. A deep, ragged breath escaped his lips. He had hoped the man wouldn't ask that, but he supposed it was inevitable. Yagi's hands tightened around the bags, the hamburger grease beginning to coat his fingers and shirt. I'll admit, he began, when I first received the report I was going to, his mouth drew into a thin, determined line. But, Tsukachi added, dark eyes widening ever so slightly. Something changed. When I saw him I didn't see that. Even after he hit me with his shield, he explained. His cheek throbbed at the reminder. They began to slow as they approached the boy's door. A hand rested against his shoulder. He looked down at the detective. A calm, collected gaze greeted him. What did you see then? Yagi closed his eyes. The image of young Midoriya's tearful face was no different than the countless others he had encountered in his decades as the symbol of peace. I saw a scared child. The detective gave a thoughtful hum. A scared child who took out the number 2 hero of Japan, Tsukachi recalled, scratching his chin. Something about this doesn't add up. You're right, Yagi remarked, flexing his muscles once more to resume his larger form. I am confident that with your help we'll be able to get to the bottom of this. He grabbed the handle, eyeing the teen through the door's small window. The boy startled at his appearance but waved back, a small smile on his lips. Yagi mirrored the look. His friend nodded, a look of determination across his features. After you then. Tsukachi scanned the interior. Nothing out of the ordinary. The hospital room was an off-white shade, fitted with basic medical instruments and a small chair for visitors. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the shades, painting the room in a mixture of colors. He hung his hat and coat on a simple rack near the door before approaching the room's youngest occupant. All Might sat the bag of greasy food on a table nearby, handing the teen not 1, not 2, but 10 hamburgers and a tall shake. Tsukachi wished he were kidding. Equally surprising was how quickly the kid put away the food. Within minutes all that was left was a small mountain of wrappers and a sated Izuku Midoriya. He cleaned up the area with the symbol of peace until his bedside was empty of trash. Tsukachi couldn't help noticing the boy's almost military efficiency. Who was this kid? Only one way to find out, he thought. The detective stepped forward. Good afternoon. He introduced himself pleasantly. My name is Naomasa Tsukachi. All Might invited me here. And you are. He already knew the boy's name, but it didn't hurt to begin with something simple between them. He wanted to build up some trust at least. 2 green eyes looked up from beneath a mess of pale curls. The boy All Might spoke of was rather plain-looking. Nice, but nothing that made him stand out against the crowd. In fact, he looked more like some average middle school student than the fearsome vigilante the press had been playing up for the country. Izuku Midoriya, sir, the teen stammered. A familiar warm buzz in Tsukachi's mind alerted him to the statement's truth. Interesting. You're very polite, he replied, a small smile emerging. I appreciate that. If it's all right with you, I'd like you to answer a few questions. Midoriya's fingers splayed against the large shield, drumming along the rim nervously. Is it okay if I ask some myself? Of course. He looked up. You're with the police, right? Tsukachi blinked, trying to control to keep his face neutral. Yes. How did you know? The way you carry yourself, he mumbled before his eyes flickered over to the rack. And I saw a glimpse of your badge when you took off your jacket. You're very astute, Mr. Midoriya, he remarked, slightly impressed. The young teen blushed, face bright red as he motioned his hands about in front of him. Oh no, not really. His index scratched at his cheek bashfully. I just like to analyze things. Don't sell yourself short. If you train skills like that, you would make a fine policeman. Tsukachi inwardly marked the immediate change in demeanor. The flinch and paling features told him that the remark might not have come off as he intended. Midoriya gave a weak smile, changing the conversation in the same leap. This is Kamino Ward, right? Correct. We're currently in Sanjuku Hospital. Do you know where that is? No, he admitted sheepishly. Things have changed a lot since I was here before. That's okay. The shadow behind him wavered. Tsukachi peered up. All Might, would you like to sit down? You're looming over me. The symbol of peace covered his embarrassment with a hearty laugh. Pious. Pardon me. Tsukachi struggled not to snort as the large man settled into the small chair near the bedside, almost too big to fit into it. The seat creaked but held, a testament to its strength. Rolling his shoulders, he moved on to the next question. How old are you, Midoriya? There was a short pause, the teen's features clouded as if thinking on the answer, which struck Tsukachi as odd. It didn't last long, however, as Midoriya soon answered, biologically? 15. The answer was truthful, but the DL voice struck the detective as odd, if not outright suspicious. Biologically, but chronologically? Did that mean he was older than he actually was, or was this merely another illustration of Midoriya's nervous speaking pattern? Tsukachi's eyes narrowed. His gut told him it was the former, but he didn't want to push the teen. You're quite young, he commented. His gaze sharpened as he switched to the main issue at hand. Could you replay the events that happened to you? Midoriya bit down on his bottom lip before asking, will this be off or on the record? Why do you ask? I don't. The boy's jaw tightened, hand curling around the sides of the shield. I'm afraid of this information getting out. Sorry. And I haven't had the best time with the police in my time. Tsukachi felt for the kid. I'm sorry to hear that. The Quirk Regulation Act requires me to report on illegal quirk usage, however. The teen's brows furrowed. Illegal quirk usage? You used what we assume was an augmentation quirk against several police officers and one professional hero, Tsukachi recounted. Professional hero? He shook his head before sighing. Now I'm even more confused. You don't know what a professional hero is? Tsukachi and All Might shared a concerned look. Had something given the boy brain damage? Did they need to call the doctor back in? No. Is this like the comics? He turned to the man in the chair, eyes wide. Wait, are you a professional hero too, Mr. All Might? The man in question flashed his trademark smile. I am indeed. Tsukachi could almost see the stars in Midoriya's eyes. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. How did you come to be a hero? The boy continued to rattle off question after question without waiting for a response. You said it was professional, so does that mean it's a regulated position? Is it salary-based or hourly-based? What kinds of things do heroes do here? Are there specializations for heroes like in other jobs? How similar are they to the comics? Are you like Avengers or more like the Justice League? What's the most popular superhero team in Japan? How many heroes are there in Japan? Is there? Whoa there, young Midoriya, All Might chuckled, patting the boy's shoulder. Calm down. That's quite a lot of questions. Sorry, it's just... He scratched the back of his head, eyes wistful. It's kind of exciting, you know? His attention drifted to the window. A bittersweet mask passed over his features before fading into a more neutral look. My uncle would have loved to meet you. He's the one who introduced me to comics. Sorry for getting off track. Tsukachi nodded, taking the familial relation into account in his mind. The words he'd used were past tense. Did his uncle die perhaps? Whilst thinking over the new information, he continued on in a light-hearted manner. It's no problem at all. Why don't you start off with how you got into the fight with Endeavor? Midoriya brought his index and thumb beneath his bottom lip, the fingers twitching as he spoke. Well, it's sort of weird. I mean, I was doing one thing, and the next moment I woke up in an ambulance, except it wasn't a real ambulance. The people were all dressed in black and they started freaking out when I started waking up. He released a nervous laugh. I might have overreacted. I hope they're not too injured. The detective hummed, noting the warm buzz of truth in his statements, though the vague information did unsettle him slightly. Ultimately, he came to the conclusion that the boy was hiding something, but he was being mostly truthful. I'll be sure to investigate. What happened next? I escaped the ambulance and ended up in the middle of the street. He released a soft sigh, shoulders slumping forward. It was all really overwhelming. Overwhelming? How do you mean? All Might inquired. Well, I thought I was back home again, but everything was different. And then those guys came back for me and I tried to defend myself. His lips tugged downwards. And then the police came, Tsukachi guessed. They wanted me to put down my shield, but I couldn't. The boy's hold tightened around the shield, knuckles turning white as he brought it closer to his chest. All Might leaned forward, elbows resting against the bedside. So you used your quirk to defend yourself? It made sense. Tsukachi could already see the police report he would write up. A traumatized kidnapped teen who used his quirk out of self-defense and fear was a lot less terrifying than an unknown vigilante who tried to kill the number 2 hero theory that was being thrown about. He could work with that. Midoriya's shoulders rose to his ears, discomfort leaking from his entire body. He didn't want to answer. Tsukachi didn't blame him. Most people didn't like talking to someone who was the human equivalent of a lie detector. And then the boy answered with something Tsukachi was not prepared for. No. The response was soft, barely audible if he and All Might were not sitting so close to the teen. What? Was all Tsukachi remarked. I didn't use any quirk, sir, Midoriya confessed. Don't have one. So you took down Endeavor and several police officers with just your shield? All Might asked, his tone matching Tsukachi in disbelief. He looked over to him for confirmation. The detective nodded. The buzz didn't lie. It was all true. A quirkless child took down the number 2 hero. The media would have a field day if such information got out. Midoriya threw him a nervous smile, fingers drumming along the top of the very weapon that took down Endeavor. It's a very good shield. Tsukachi blinked rapidly, trying to reclaim some semblance of control. This was soon becoming one of the top 5 strangest cases he'd been brought onto. You know, with the way you swung that thing around, I would have thought you were Captain Kamino, he joked, trying to lighten the strange tension that filled the room. Sadly, it did anything but. Midoriya seemed to crumple in on himself. He pinched his nose, hair covering his eyes as if he were actually thinking about. The world seemed to slow down around Tsukachi. He squinted, brows crossing as his instincts took hold. No, it could be. All Might noticed the change immediately, resting a hand on the teen's small shoulder. Young Midoriya? Are you feeling all right? Should I get the doctor? The teen squirmed beneath the man's hand, turning the same shade as his hair. Finally, he looked back at Tsukachi, vulnerability hidden behind a thin veneer of politeness. You said you're required to report this, right? The red, green, and black colors on the boy's shield burned into his eyelids. Tsukachi looked to the symbol of peace, wondering if he was arriving at the now very possible, very unbelievable answer before them. Only if you used your quirk, but you didn't, Tsukachi stated, desperately trying to calm his frantic heart. So, technically, my capacity as a police officer need not apply here. All Might did call me here as a friend. Indeed. All Might pressed forward in a softer tone. Young Midoriya, is there something you would like to share with us? You look like you have something you want to say. His shoulders relaxed, if only slightly at the news. This is the future, so it's not like I'm a fugitive anymore, right? The buzz inside his mind felt neither cold nor hot. An inconclusive statement then. Tsukachi swallowed, trying to keep from blurting out the question that rose to the tip of his tongue. No, you are not a fugitive, young man, All Might assured, looking to Tsukachi for confirmation. The detective shrugged. While unprofessional, he really wasn't in his element anymore. Not with the bubbling truth just beneath the surface of their conversation. He had to know, he needed to ask. That's good. At least I don't have to worry about that anymore, Midoriya remarked softly. He couldn't contain it. You, Tsukachi hesitated, almost not believing the words that came out of his mouth. You're Captain Kamino? Tsukachi had seen a lot of things in his years as a detective. Unexplained murders, mysterious bank robberies, trigger busts, political sabotage, the works. His dealings with pro-heroes, and to a certain extent vigilantes, provided him in even greater access to the criminal underworld. Despite Japan's relatively low crime rate, there were still unexplainable crimes that needed solving. This was none of the above. His hands itched to grab onto something, anything to keep himself steady at the dawning realization. Midoriya, bless the boy's soul, had the gall to look meek as he answered in a question-like tone, as if he were afraid of how they would react. Yes. And just like that, Tsukachi's world flipped upside down. His colleague wasn't much better. He had never seen such a look on the symbol of peace. I think I need to sit down, All Might stated faintly. You're already sitting, noted the detective in a similar tone. Tsukachi wanted to laugh. The progenitor of Japanese heroics was a 15-year-old boy. Forget Japan. The entire world would go insane if this information was brought to light. What was supposed to be a simple interview had turned into something far more in only the span of a few minutes. The truth really was stranger than fiction sometimes. One thing was for sure, however. He needed a drink. Check out my Discord for sneak previews of chapters, FIC Rex, and fan art. Hero Public Safety Commission Private Collection, undisclosed. Accessed March 23, 23XX. Meta Registration Act. All metahumans must register with the Meta Registration Board of Japan upon discovery of their metamutagen. It shall be unlawful for any meta-parent, relative, or guardian to have custody or control over a non-meta child, adopted or biological. It shall be unlawful for any metahuman to be married to a partner without government authorization. All meta-unions prior to and after this act are null and void. It shall be unlawful for a metahuman to receive an education without registering with the Meta Registration Board. There cannot be more than one meta student per class and no more than 5 per school. All metahumans are barred from technical and professional education without government authorization. It shall be unlawful for metahumans to congregate in groups of more than 10 without police supervision in public. Peaceful assembly and association of more than 30 must be pre-registered with the local government and the Meta Registration Board at least 6 months prior. It shall be unlawful for metahumans to use their meta ability in any capacity in a public or private setting. Use of one's meta ability will result in an immediate arrest by local authorities. All non-metahumans are required to report the use of a meta ability in their vicinity. Failure to do so will result in a fine of more than. Poster for Captain Kamino with slogan, Plus Ultra. Created by Ayana. C2XXX. From the Library of Yokohama City Prints and Drawings Online Catalog. https://l-ana-art.tumblr.com. Shigaraki, H. The Rise of Meta Powers in the 21st Century, The Symbol of Peace. Kamino Quarterly, Volume 40, Number 2, 21XX, pages 50. The Rise of Meta Powers in the 21st Century, The Symbol of Peace. Hisashi Shigaraki. Department of Quirk Studies, Kamino University, Yokohama City, Japan. Abstract. This paper discusses the relevance of Captain Kamino as an integral figure in Japanese quirk politics in the 21st century. While the manifestation of quirk rights doctrines took decades for quirk users in North American and European countries to come into fruition, it was over a PRD of months that the first iteration of the Kamino Accords were created, largely due to the captain's expansive influence on the Japanese public. This paper highlights Captain's history, the origins of his iconic motto, and his rapid growth as a public figure. Although the captain disappeared prior to the Accord's enactment, his actions continue to resonate with Japanese society. The conclusion of this paper will highlight the most popular theories surrounding the captain's disappearance and how the captain's actions have impacted past history and today. How did Captain Kamino get recognition as being plus ultra? There has never been a man like the Cap, and there will never be again. He was one of a kind. Hisahito Saikatsu, head professor of quirk studies at Osaka University. The early 21st century was a century like no other. Global warming, war, and disease were of great concern, but none were as impactful on the human race as the meta-human phenomenon. As described by the late Sir Arthur Culligan in his book, Postmodernization and Humanity's Evolution, the advent of the extraordinaries was the fall of normalcy as we knew it. Nature's law became irrelevant in the face of these supernatural abilities. Unsurprisingly, humans reacted as they always do, with fear and hatred against the unknown. Culligan, 21XX, 12-13. Meta-power, now commonly referred to as quirks, were held by the minority, heavily discriminated against by the general populace from their precipice. In response to emergence of these new metahumans, the Japanese government enacted several measures, though none had as much of a negative impact as the Meta-Registration Act, commonly referred to as MRA. Enacted in 20XX, the MRA was a collection of 14 laws that limited the rights of the meta-population in Japan, emulating the likes of China's mutagen containment measures and the United States' War on Meta Act. The results were catastrophic from a human rights standpoint. Meta-children separated from parents, meta-parents torn from their children, marriages annulled, restricted. Healthcare rights for those who harbored meta-family members. The laws spared no one. Dr. Hikari Honda touches greatly upon this humanitarian disaster in her latest book, Meta Japan, The Lost, the Missing and the Dead, referencing recent records recovered from the previous Japanese Ministry of Justice, where over 12 facilities were created for those whom the government considered to hold dangerous powers. Only 15% of those placed in these facilities were recorded to have survived. Honda, 21XX, 45. Dr. Honda further expounds on the matter with interviews with the remaining survivors, who recount their experiences to excruciating detail. But out of each interviewee Dr. Honda encountered, all spoke of the same person. As Dr. Honda's first interviewee Isamu Otaki recounted, despite the terror we all faced, we still watched the news and hoped for something new. And it came. He came. Honda, 21XX, 30. No meta-rights activist made a more lasting cultural impression than Captain Kamino. The earliest recording of Captain Kamino came just days after the enactment of the MRA at a meta-rights rally on the steps of Yokohama City's courthouse. While very few records remain, the infamous event is remembered by many who attended. One in particular, Japan's first elected meta-representative Orochi Onaga, recounted his own experience there in his closing speech after serving the new government for more than 30 years. I did not become a politician out of desire but out of necessity. As a young man with a snake mutation, I was terrified of being separated from my husband. The rally was supposed to be a peaceful protest, but the JSDF did not see it that way. I did not see what caused them to start attacking us, but I did see him. He grabbed a manhole cover off the ground and pushed back several officers. It's because of him my husband and I were able to escape arrest. I'll never forget that, not even to my dying days. Onaga, 21XX, 23. The stand in Kamino became the starting point for the captain. Over the next few months, his continued acts of resistance solidified his image as a symbol of hope for the meta-populace. Opposing parties did not take kindly to the captain's presence, however. The Japanese government feared his growing influence, as seen in the numerous journal articles and news propaganda they published to discredit the man. In a desperate claim to restore order, they tried to arrest him during the Meta Power Conference where he was scheduled to appear, only to fail and instead kill 13 people in what would later be known as the Sumida Massacre. His followers tried to reason with him. Reka Todoroki, one of the captain's most trusted members, published a collection of his writings during this PRD, A Recollection of Discrimination and Hope, where in a letter sent to the captain on March 21, 3 days before the Great Panic in Tokyo. To summarize, he stated that it was too dangerous for the captain to meet with the meta-users in that. What they needed, he argued, was to let the Tokyo meta-users fend for themselves while they reorganized back in Yokohama. Todoroki, 2XXX, 68. Captain Kamino's response was sharp. I see people in need and a way to use my power for their sake. In a world looking less and less human, who will stand up for the meta-users? Todoroki, 2XXX, 68. Whether he realized it or not, the captain's words resonated with the meta populace, solidifying his symbolic image as well as his potential danger to the Japanese government. He went beyond the average meta activist, something that soon became a running theme with the man. Setting a standard, the meaning behind the infamous catchphrase. Plus Ultra did not always carry the meaning of doing your best and then some, as most Japanese now use it. The phrase was coined under Charles V, February 24, 1500 to September 21, 1558, Holy Roman Emperor and King of Spain, becoming the latter's official country motto soon after as the ruler expanded his borders past his country into the new world of what we know of today as North and South America. Thus, the term translated directly as further beyond became part of the Western world's hunger for conquest and colonization, later diversifying in the 20th century as colonialism began to die out with the emergence of nationalism within their previous territories and a series of world wars within their own. The Japanese meaning came from the captain's self-admitted family motto, the full phrase being Kishikaizei to plus ultra, which translates into wake from death and return to life and further beyond. The first half of the motto has been largely forgotten due to the second half's immortalization in the infamous Plus Ultra poster, made by late Japanese artist and meta rights activist Izumi Anami as seen above. See Figure 1. Gathering the people. It is no secret that the captain was new to politics. Shortly after his arrival into the public sphere, Captain Kamino expressed openly in his first speech on the streets of Osaka, "I have two main fears. One is being unable to help those in need because of my own weaknesses. The other is public speaking." Todoroki 2XXX12. Modern scholars have debated this speech at great length for its truthfulness. Nonetheless, these words helped soothe and humor the Japanese meta population, who came to view the captain as less of an untouchable leader and more of a relatable comrade. And what a comrade he was! With over 50 public appearances, he was able to cement himself as a meta rights revolutionary. Todoroki 2XXX23. Modern Quirk Studies professor Hiro Mays of Tokyo University put it best in his new Quirk Times article, One for All and All for One, Japan's Lost Hero, stating, "Unlike his predecessors, Captain Kamino did not focus on promoting himself to a Western audience, but deeply embedded himself into the local and regional scenes, attending rallies, marches, and events to promote his agenda. His guerrilla warfare tactics against the police and anti-meta agitators and his breakouts from meta prison facilities brought him as many enemies as he had allies on both sides." Mays 21XX1. His outfit, fashioned after those of American and Japanese superheroes, made him stand out against the other well-known activists during the PRD like writer Ichigo Matsumoto and the famous meta-philanthropist Yori Iha. By the time he became a national figure, he had already captured the attention of the Japanese meta population, to the government's chagrin. All scholars agree, however, that out of everything, the biggest asset in the captain's arsenal was his ability to amass followers to his cause. The vast amount of resources and volunteers he was able to organize in such a short PRD of time was unprecedented. Several scholars argue on whether or not he had a backer prior to his breakthrough moment into popularity, but their evidence on the subject is speculation at best. As renowned journalist and meta-activist Tatsuya Mochizuki believes, even if he did have a few backers, it doesn't detract from who he was to the Japanese people. He was a symbol for a lot of folks, both good and bad. Mochizuki 2XXX. Mochizuki's words could not be truer. Captain Kamino's last public appearance was said to have garnered over 20,000 attendees, not a small number considering Japan's meta population numbered a little more than 200,000 people at the time. Be it for or against the cause, Captain Kamino stood out against the rest for his relatability and thereby cemented himself into Japan's history. The vanishing hero. Like many historical figures, his height of popularity was cut short by tragedy. Merely 9 months into his career, the symbol of hope suddenly disappeared from the public eye. Several theories have been made since then. The fade-out theory, proposed by Dr. Mitsuo Tano of Tokuda University in his book, Modern Legends, postulates that the captain stepped down from his post on purpose, hoping to vanish into obscurity. Tano 21XX12. Sir Arthur Culligan agrees to that theory, speculating, the symbol replaced the original in a way. Once the captain's message overtook the Japanese psyche, he perhaps saw no other option than to let the dream continue without him. After all, no man can ever hope to match an icon. Culligan, 21XX, 34. Others, particularly Japanese scholars, are of the secrecy theory proposed by historian Rin Furatani under an article of the same title, in that Captain Kamino had been killed by the JSDF sometime in northern Japan and the government hid the truth in order to prevent a countrywide riot. Furatani, 21XX. At present the current pro-quirk Japanese government has not disclosed any information in account of that, making the theory conjecture at best. Either way, his last recorded appearance was in Hokkaido, Japan, boarding a plane for an undisclosed location. That was not the last of Captain Kamino, however. His words continued to exist through the pamphlets, books, and biographies of those he left behind. Additionally, mere months after his disappearance the Kamino Accords were enacted, allowing Japanese meta-users a brief PRD of respite before the Japanese government fell during the dark days. Unlike the previous government, the new era wholeheartedly embraced the captain's image as a quirk right symbol. Even now, 5 decades after his disappearance, his symbol lives on in Japanese society as more and more quirk users are born. Perhaps people will find out what happened to Captain Kamino one day. For now, however, he will continue to stay in the hearts and minds of those who believed in his message, awaiting the day he would return to them once more. The Kamino Accords, Declaration on Metahuman Rights and Anti-Retaliation Measures. The participating parties shall respect certain human rights and freedoms of meta and non-meta humans alike, including the rights to trial, marriage, family, possessions, public assembly, speech, social security, work, education and freedoms of thought, expression, religion or belief. No party pledging to this agreement will try to hinder, disrupt or destroy these rights and freedoms for so long as this agreement shall last. The participating parties will recognize and acknowledge the laws set out by the Japanese government. Metahumans who have been arrested will receive a right to trial, while those who participated in criminal acts against person and property will have their cases reviewed under a panel to determine if there should be a restoration of rights. The participating parties will respect and comply with orders from soldiers in the Japanese Defense Forces or officers in the Japanese Police Force. All soldiers and officers captured by the opposing party shall be released and returned back to the Japanese government alive. No harm shall come from quirk users to any prior acts committed by soldiers or officers. Yukihara, R. A Scholarly Opinion, The Future of Japan Amidst the Mutation Epidemic. Modern Perspective, Volume 2, Number 4, 20XX, pages 12, A Scholarly Opinion, The Future of Japan Amidst the Mutation Epidemic. Raizo Yukihara. The land of the rising sun has not been without its struggles. For over a millennia, Japan has survived countless geographical, political, and socioeconomic disasters. Its current crisis is no different. The future, however, may be in jeopardy if the mutant terrorism is not contained. Humans have long suffered from bacterial viruses and diseases, but none have been as prolific as the metamutagen. Currently, the meta-disease has no known point of origin. The earliest recorded evidence occurred during the birth of Ms. Huang Qiao in Qingqing City, China, with the ability to emit a bright light. The disease has long since spread throughout the rest of the world, infecting not just babies but children and teens at an unnatural rate. While the cause is unknown, the most accepted theory is that of biologist Koshi Hori of Toru University. In his book, The Mutant Epidemic, he has determined the most likely cause is not evolution as pro-meta activists have proclaimed, but a mutagen virus spread via laboratory mice. Within 20 years of Ms. Huang Qiao's birth, over 5 million people were found to be infected, and the numbers continue to increase even today. Modern Japanese historians are a rather argumentative group, but all can agree that these mutagen sufferers have been an ongoing political and socio-conflict for Japanese society. Their volatile nature has proven time and time again that they are unable to function within Japanese culture, and their inability to control their meta powers makes them dangerous to the average person. In his writings for the magazine Collective Circle, Dr. Kudo Madoka points out that, The emergence of mutants has created societal unrest and fear in both the Western and Eastern hemispheres. Even now, decades after the first mutant was born, they are unable to obey the laws set out by the majority, preferring to skirt and even violate the mandates the government has set up to protect the non-mutated populace from unchecked powers. The worst offender was the mutant codenamed Captain Kamino. As Minister of Defense Daichi Mikami has openly stated in his inauguration, no meta-user has terrorized Japan more than the captain, and hopefully, none shall after. His first appearance in Yokohama City became his first offense, resisting police and engaging in several counts of property damage. Origins of the man remain a mystery, despite the government's attempts to unmask the costumed mutant after his disappearance. This is largely due to the fact that many of his followers have dispersed, key figures now abroad or in hiding. In spite of his relatively short time in the media spotlight, the captain's involvement in meta-politics and mutant riots built the stepping stones for what would soon become the Great Panic. Criminals from Tokyo and Yokohama reacted negatively to Japan's Mutant Registration Act, interrupting a peaceful protest and enacting violence against the Japanese Defense Forces. The event devastated many of Japan's biggest cities, lasting over 6 days with thousands arrested and even more injured in the crossfire. That was not the end for the captain, however. Throughout his 9 months of terror, the captain confessed to several criminal assaults across Japan. In his Yokohama address, he even professed to stopping the government's forces in whatever manner possible from taking our people. Following the speech, the captain enticed groups in several prefectures to prosecute the Venerable Minister of Justice Sando Masahiko for unfounded accusations of judicial sabotage and unlawful arrests. Minister Masahiko's recent changes in the judicial system were not without factual evidence. Crime in Japan has risen to unprecedented levels over the last few decades, up 30% from last year at the time of this article's publication. According to the Japanese crime statistics of 2XXX, over 80% of all violent crimes are perpetrated by meta-users. A similar trend exists across over 63 countries, which is why Minister Masahiko saw fit to curb the violence, both for meta and Japanese society. Recent radical legislation could put Japan's history at risk, however. The Accords, officially titled the Kamino Accords, are in essence an unofficial peace treaty between the mutants and the Japanese government, restoring mutants' Japanese citizenship, with exceptions to those who have committed personal or property crimes during the Great Panic. The Accords were brought up in the House of Representatives by the Equal Democracy Party, EDP, a new political group led by Iwao Takei with support from former Ritsuminto member Hisashi Setsushi. The party has quickly gained traction with its appeals towards mutants and mutant sympathizers. The EDP's coalition with independents and smaller parties helped push the legislation on a fast track through the legislature, overriding Prime Minister Yasuhiro Hirai's party's numerous concerns. As the Prime Minister put it, "They EDP are jeopardizing our sovereignty without any regard to our country's executive branch or the voting system. This will set a grave precedent that those who do not abide by our laws can simply extort the system using violence." Though the future of Japan remains uncertain, the Japanese Executive Office has taken steps to mitigate the damage caused by these mutants. Nevertheless, there are many meta-terrorists who still remain at large. As elections come up, Prime Minister Hirai has proposed several key legislation to curb continued meta-disruption throughout Japan. Whether or not they will be passed, even though the Prime Minister's party still holds a majority, is yet to be determined. At any rate, even in our darkest hours, Japanese culture still perseveres against the tests of time. Quirk Propaganda Collection, Kamino University. Accessed March 23, 23XX. https Instagram.com Xbloodybo, Ixshidu 0RU3JYT70. Joe, T. Conflicting Perspectives, Japan's Obsession with Quirks versus its Fear of Mutant-Type Quirks. Quirk Studies in Japanese History, Volume 13, Number 1, 23XX, pages 42, Conflicting Perspectives, Japan's Obsession with Quirks versus its Fear of Mutant-Type Quirks. Tetsuya Joe. Abstract. This article examines Japan's past history with pseudoscientific personality theories and how it relates to present Japan's obsession and prejudice towards certain quirks. It explores the historical context behind quirk culture in Japanese society, as well as how it ties into the country's discrimination towards mutant-type quirk holders. The paper concludes by discussing the inequities faced by those with mutant quirks and the difficulties they have in modern society in employment and housing. A short history, from blood types to quirk types. Japan's obsession with quirks is not without historical context. Prior to the advent of the extraordinaries, Japan had another favorite personality-based curiosity: blood types. More specifically, the pseudoscientific belief that a person's Ketsuekigata predicts one's character traits and how one relates to others. The case for this was first proposed in Dr. Keiko Ito's controversial article, Japan's History with Horoscopes and Blood Types, which relates the blood type obsession to Japan's system of quirk classification. 1. Unlike the commonly used American-style 20-point quirk tree or the European-style 32 quirk branches structure, Japan uses the 3-quirk system, a categorical style that has not been updated in more than 100 years. 2. Emitter quirks, the most common quirks by a large margin, according to Dr. Ito, could be theorized as taking the place of O-type blood, who are considered to be outgoing and confident. 3. On the other side, transformation types, which are the rarest, are implied by Dr. Ito as taking the place of A or AB, that is, creative or careful personalities. 4. This leaves mutant type in the place of B, often referred to as the most opinionated personality. 5. Several historians have called Dr. Ito's theory into question. However, while this is all still in theoretical territory, there is a certain historical correlation of discrimination towards B blood types that have now been imputed onto mutant quirk types. As with Burihura, a portmanteau of blood type and harassment, mutant type discrimination can be seen in Japan through elementary and middle school bullying, a loss of job opportunities, and higher divorce rates. As a team of scientists from the Department of Quirk History at Tohoku University reported this past spring, recent research indicates a significantly greater margin of discrimination in the job market between those who have mutant types versus emitter and transformation types combined. 6. Unemployment numbers, income disparity, and crime rates are all abnormally higher within this group as well. Since Japanese applications require disclosure of one's blood type and one's quirk, Tohoku University research shows that those with B-type blood and mutant quirks have scored the highest on the discrimination scale, with over 60% unemployment numbers, 70% income disparity, and a staggering 42% with a criminal record. 7. Nevertheless, it is important to note that this is a relatively new study, so evidence may not be conclusive on the matter, but similar experiments are being recorded at Kyoto University and the University of Tokyo at present that may help shine a light on this societal issue. While Japan likes to position itself as one of the first countries who gave quirk users rights and emerged out of the dark days PRD relatively unscathed in comparison to the United States, China, and the European Union, there is an undercurrent of societal discrimination that is largely ignored by mainstream media and the general populace. Considering how Japanese history taught in schools does little to touch upon the issues, it is not hard to see why. The dawn of quirks, a symbol of hope. Japan's obsession with quirks wasn't immediate. In fact, at the beginning of the 21st century, Japan was one of the first countries to start restricting quirk user rights. One example is the infamous Aiko case, which criminalized marriages between quirk users. 8. The Meta Registration Act, MRA, was formed from the combined efforts of the anti-Meta Conservative Party's Human Alliance, HA, and Japanese People for Japan, JPJ. 9. The cause came from a Tokyo University study regarding the gradual increase in meta crime over the last 10 years in comparison to the previous decades. 10. The effects of the MRA were devastating on Japan's quirk population. But where there is desperation comes hope, or in this case, a symbol of hope. As 22nd century quirk scholar Kenji Toyoshima put it, where the Americans have Superman, the Japanese have Captain Kamino. 11. Unlike Superman, however, Captain Kamino was a real person, or rather, people, as new evidence suggests. As Dr. Rin Tsuchiya has shown in her critically acclaimed yet controversial book Behind the Shield, Captain Kamino may not have worn his costume simply out of protecting his own identity but rather several people's. 12. This theory pulls from his uncanny appeal to the general population and his ability to be in several places in a short period of time, which made him an alarming threat to the Japanese political system at the time. Dr. Tsuchiya is not the first to come up with this theory. Several Western historians have also pondered this very question. 20 years prior to Dr. Tsuchiya's publishing, another woman proposed a similar stance. Japanese history scholar Rode Kells of Harvard University's book, Japanese Heroes of Yesteryear, was heavily acclaimed by Western audiences while severely pandered by the Japanese public, enough that several memes sprouted of using the book in less than savory ways. 13. Dr. Tsuchiya even commented on this kind of reaction in her book, noting, Japan's obsession with quirks and heroes starts with Captain Kamino. To break the illusion is an insult to the Japanese public. Going against the current of what the country views as correct is like trying to fight a river. You don't win. You just end up wet and tired. 14. It is true that the captain has left a huge footprint on the country. Even the captain's motto, plus ultra, has become ingrained into the cultural consciousness, now an everyday catchphrase further popularized by the symbol of peace himself. 15. In less than a year Captain Kamino made a name for himself in Japanese politics, and just as soon as he did, he vanished. His disappearance aroused emotions not seen since the Great Kanto earthquake. 16. This tragedy spurred the quirk population, however, ultimately leading to the Kamino Accords. While the accords themselves did not stay in place for very long, their creation and implementation were groundbreaking at the time and heavily influenced future reiterations. 17. The Kamino Accords set a standard for the rest of the world. But as much as Japan likes to promote tolerance for quirk and quirkless alike, the same cannot be said for those with mutant quirks. Is quirk discrimination still an issue in modern times? While discrimination against quirks as a whole has disappeared, in part due to those with quirks now making up almost 80% of the population, those with mutant quirks are still discriminated against on a constant basis. Statistical evidence proves strong on this point. Roughly half of those with mutant quirks are at or below basic income. 18. Even with the National Labor Equality Act in 23XX, which expanded labor rights for employees, it deliberately excluded temporary and part-time workers whose numbers are majority mutant and did not address the primary issue at the time, disclosure of quirks in resumes. 19. The public's rejection of quirk privacy is nothing new. Mutant scholars including Akira Inakami, a psychologist whose research in their book Quirk Discrimination in the Japanese Education System Reformed Quirk Teaching Methods, states it best. As Japan's interest in quirks grew, so too did its valuation of them. Quirks became a part of people like a personality trait, so those with what the public considers as better quirks are inherently more valuable than others. 20. Dr. Inakami isn't alone in this manner of thought. Even Dr. Tsuchiya has touched upon it in her book, writing, much of Japanese society isn't even aware of their own prejudices. The urban areas have a lot more accessibility for mutant types who can't live in normal housing but in rural areas? It's near impossible. A majority of Japan isn't even up to code despite the last Quirk Equality Act they passed over a decade ago. 21. Japan's obsession with quirks is by no means stopping anytime soon. The Japanese government recently spent over 90 billion yen into quirk technology, with only 50 million yen going to remodeling Japanese homes for mutant quirk occupants. 22. While more and more mutant celebrities and professional heroes are coming out against the structural discrimination, no movement has yet to gain a foothold into the Japanese psyche. In a world without a Captain Kamino to save the day, what will mutant quirk users do next? The answer remains unclear. Bibliography. Ito, Keiko. Japan's History with Horoscopes and Blood Types, 21st Century Society and Lifestyle 78, No. 9, 22XX Suzuki, Saito, Quirks Around the World, Tokyo, Empress, 22XX, 1, Suzuki 22XX, 4, Suzuki, 22XX, Suzuki, 22XX, Goto, Endo, Aoki. Quirk discrimination in Japan, evaluating the statistics by quirk type. Tokyo, Tohoku University Press, LLC, 22XX, 7, Godu, Endo, Aoki, 22XX, Aiko vs. Nakamura, 411 JP. 802, 2XXX. Shinsui, Ejiri, War and Art in the First Age of Quirks, Yokohama. Kamino Publishing, 22XX. Shinsui, 22XX, Toyoshima, Kenji. Experience as a Japanese quirk user. Speech, Tokyo, Japan, September 13, 22XX. Tsuchiya, Rin, Behind the Shield, Kyoto, Libertas, 23XX. 1 Kells, Road, Japanese Heroes of Yesteryear, Boston, Harvard Press, 22XX. 44 Tsuya, 23XX. Tsuchiya, 23XX. Dupainting, Estelle, The Original Symbol of Peace, Captain Kamino in Perspective, Paris. Editions de l'École Française d'Extrême Orient, 22XX. Dupainting, 22XX. Go-To, Endo, Aoki, 22XX. Go-To, Endo, Aoki, 22XX. 20 Inakami, Akira Quirk Discrimination in the Japanese Education System, Osaka. Hacken Company, 22XX. Tsuchiya, 23XX. Go-To, Endo, Aoki, 22XX. Captain Kamino, The First Hero. Directed by John Jo-sun. Los Angeles, Bisnay, 23XX. Haas, Will Eric. Quirk Politics in Japan, Nationalism in Perspective. Quirks and World Cultures, Special Issue of Journal of Contemporary History, Volume 3, Number 6, 22XX, pages 89, Quirk Politics in Japan, Nationalism in Perspective. Will Eric Haas. Abstract. This paper argues that Japan's obsession with quirks is derived from national populist movements centered around quirks in the 21st century. That is it through these movements that the figure Captain Kamino was created as a sort of figure for quirk pride and inclusion. This paper highlights the historical inaccuracies in Japan's early 22nd century historical articles and promotes the theory that Captain Kamino is nothing more than a legend used to promote Japanese exceptionalism and capitalism, as well as the captain's connections to the Equal Democracy Party during the PRD. It concludes by calling into question Japan's undercurrent of discrimination towards undesirable quirks. Humble beginnings. The man, the myth, the legend. The last few centuries have witnessed a shift in humanity's evolution. The emergence of quirks, also known as meta-powers or individualities, forever transformed the world's political, social, and economic landscapes. The dawn of these extraordinary powers, however, came with social and political unrest, the breakdown of society as those with quirks fought government sanctions, and those without began to fear and discriminate against this new minority. It is during this PRD that the term vigilante truly took form, and none are as infamous as the figure of Captain Kamino. While relatively unknown outside of Japan, the captain permeates Japanese culture like a virus, merchandise available from Akihabara all the way to Ribun Island. It's not hard to see why. The story of Captain Kamino is like any tragic hero's tale. He arises to the occasion, takes on the evil forces, then, before he can do anything more, vanishes into the night, leaving his friends and loved ones to mourn him. From Othello to Batman, the tragic hero is a trope known worldwide and prevalent in every culture. Japan's manga industry is filled to the brim with similar tales. It is no wonder that the tale of the captain follows a similar structure, its story sewed deeply into the heart of Japanese culture. The age-old question of whether Captain Kamino was a real-life figure or a man-man tale remains an ambiguous one. Following the destruction of the previous Japanese government, the first article that even mentioned the captain didn't come up until some 30 years later in Drive Shigaraki's The Rise of Meta-Powers in the 21st Century, The Symbol of Peace. While Japan likes to tout the work as one of the earliest known historical essays about the captain, there is a significant mystery in place in regard to the paper's authenticity. In fact, apart from being a member of the Department of Quirk Studies faculty, Mr. Shigaraki only wrote this single article, having taught no classes or participated in any symposiums at the university. Even his sources should be called into question, such as the exact amount of appearances Captain Kamino had, which to this day only a few photos and news articles remain, as well as the origins of Plus Ultra. Even the origins of Captain Kamino remain murky at best, the stand-in Kamino nothing more than a collection of conflicting news articles. That's not to say Captain Kamino didn't exist in some form. Ancient photography and video have shown us that someone did dress up as the figure. Whether the man actually did any of the things purported by Dr. Shigaraki and others, however, is still unsettled. What is settled, though, is the captain's significant connection to the Equal Democracy Party. The Equal Democracy Party, a nationalist party in disguise. The origins of the Equal Democracy Party, EDP, are well documented in comparison to the captain. It began as a distinctive quirk-orientated form of national populism, heralded by the late Toshio Mei, an emitter quirk user with the ability to blow frozen air. Unlike other pro-quirk parties, early on EDP was unique in its particularly nationalistic measures, desiring to stem immigration and enforce isolationist measures such as closing Japan off from foreign influence, such as pulling out of several Eastern and Western trade agreements. Unsurprisingly, these views did not attract many followers initially. It was only during the middle of the 21st century did the EDP begin to gain traction within the general quirk public, largely due to two distinct reasons. First, the replacement of Toshio Mei with Ueo Takei, a younger, less isolationist leader, and second, the emergence of Captain Kamino. Despite little visual evidence, Captain Kamino's supposed blend of informal speaking and Japanese-centric rhetoric played a significant part in his popularity, not unlike those of the EDP. In fact, several of the captain's supposed speeches have a distinct style, not unlike those of EDP speechwriter Kumo Terankura, who rose to become one of Japan's most prolific mutant quirk activists. Terankura isn't the only connection to Captain Kamino. Several members of the captain's supposed entourage have been connected to the party, the most prolific being Reka Todoroki, Tsurugi Tachi, and Masa Honda. Todoroki was previously a party member before dropping out of the group some years before, while Tachi and Honda have been photographed with several high party members both during and after their time with the captain. Several protests and marches organized by the EDP were frequented by Captain Kamino as well. While Japanese scholars are less than willing to delve into the captain's connections with the nationalist group, Western ones are not nearly so cautious. Several American and European scholars, such as Dr. Fenris Lobos of Arizona State University and Dr. Linus Loeb of Heidelberg University, are some of Captain Kamino's biggest skeptics. As written in their co-authored work, Conflict: Japan's Love and Hatred of Quirks. Real or not, the figure of Captain Kamino is rooted in Japanese populism. His short-term PRD coincides with the rise of EDP into the public sphere, and his disappearance only made the party even stronger. After the fall of the old government, the new one was all too happy to take on the EDP's vision of Captain Kamino as a national symbol, a new puppet of propaganda to prop up the new country and strengthen its cultural identity in wake of the dark PRD of uncertainty and turmoil. While the EDP was eventually absorbed into other parties, their impact remains even today. The last century is indicative of this, as despite Japan's quirk equality reforms, it has one of the most restrictive quirk laws for a developed country, with public displays of quirks prohibited without a license. While Japan touts this around as the reason for their low crime rates, the rest of the world is not so convinced. Japan's current low crime correlates to the professional hero All Might's career in the country, whereas previously it had similar numbers to countries like the United States. What that means for Japan's future after the symbol of peace retires is inconclusive. Conclusion: a stark divide. The desirable and undesirable quirks of Japan. As the great quirk study scholar Kenji Toyoshima once said, "In Japan, quirks are like a commodity. If you have one, everyone wants. People will treat you a lot better than if you have a bad one or none." Quirk discrimination is nothing new, but Japan takes it to a completely different level. Unlike most Western countries, Japan requires quirks to be disclosed on resumes, meaning those with undesirable or no quirks are often left out of several employment opportunities. In fact, according to recent studies, more than half of both quirkless and mutant quirk users work minimum to low-paying jobs. Japan also prescribes to the idea of so-called villainous quirks, in that those with certain undesirable quirks are predisposed to becoming villains themselves. This can be seen in the country's school programs based around providing children with quirk counseling. Several countries have criticized Japan's use of the old Chryslinger method, an outdated teaching model of separating students from classes to put them in special counseling, further isolating them from the rest of the group. The issue isn't merely in the education system either. Like the captain, it permeates the country's system, from its politics to its economy, preventing those with undesirable quirks from rising through its social ranks. It is no wonder over 2/3 of Japan's villains have what the country designates as villainous quirks. At the end of the day, these problems won't be solved overnight. Until Japan lets go of its hot and cold relationship with quirks, the country will likely still continue to struggle with more and more powerful villains who were spurned by their restrictive system. Kamino. Will Eric Haas, A Critical Review. Quirks and World Cultures, Special Issue of Journal of Contemporary History, Volume 4, Number 2, 22XX, pages 12, written by guest writer Clue. Will Eric Haas, A Critical Review. Mari Kamai. Abstract. A response to Will Eric Haas' essay, Quirk Politics in Japan, Nationalism in Perspective. Throughout his essay, Haas relies on suppositions and insinuations, with few references to sources. He dismisses any evidence that may complicate his arguments, fails to problematize his own perspective, and ignores the work of those he cannot hand-wave away as hopelessly biased. This review will provide a counterpoint to Haas' points, especially in regards to his embrace of the Kamino myth theory and his negative insinuations regarding Japanese scholarship on the captain. Arbitrary skepticism and unbalanced perspectives. The figure of Captain Kamino is beloved in Japan, the original symbol of peace during the violent, dark days of the mid-21st century. His work inspired countless later heroes, including the new symbol of peace, All Might, who has discussed in numerous interviews his profound respect for the captain. As Haas correctly points out, despite his reputation, solid information on Captain Kamino is scant. This is the first major area where Haas stumbles. There is scant information on most people from the mid-21st century. The Quirk Revolution was a PRD of chaos, and a great deal of documentation from that PRD was lost, destroyed, or simply never recorded in the first place. Given this, the amount of evidence we do have for the captain, a figure on the public scene for only a couple of months before his disappearance, is fairly substantial. We have several photographs of him, records of some of his speeches, and the famous article by Dr. Shigaraki, Writing Within a Generation of the Captain. Furthermore, Haas applies a level of skepticism to the captain that he does not apply to other figures of the era, even those with even less surviving evidence than the captain. For example, he accepts the existence of Toshio Mei, founder of the Equal Democracy Party, despite not a single photograph of the man surviving. Haas' skepticism is arbitrary and applied unevenly, all in an effort to push his own pet theories. Haas' most egregious act is his dismissal of Dr. Shigaraki's article, attacking the veracity of which being a particular hobby horse among Kamino mythicists. The article dates to within 30 years of Captain Kamino's career. Given the sheer amount of material lost, the anti-quirk censorship of the PRD, and the slow pace of academic work on the rise of quirks, such a gap between the captain's career and the writing of articles about him is no surprise. The case for the article's authenticity has already been expertly made by the great Western Kaminoist, Dr. Estelle de Painching of the École Française d'Extrême Orient in Paris, in her magisterial book on Captain Kamino, the original symbol of peace, Captain Kamino in Perspective. Notably, this is a text completely ignored by Will Eric Haas in his examination of Captain Kamino, despite its seminal position in Western Kaminology. Another issue is Haas' efforts to dismiss some of the captain's speeches as being later inventions by his boogeyman, the Equal Democracy Party. He argues that similarities in the speeches of Kumo Terankura and the captain demonstrate that the works of the latter are, in fact, those of the former. He completely ignores the equally likely possibility that Terankura was the one cribbing from the captain, which becomes even more likely given that Terankura repeatedly praised the captain's efforts and invoked him as a martyr for the pro-quirk cause. Excerpts from the captain's speeches survive in the contemporary newspaper articles, as well as the full text of the stand in Kamino speech, in a transcript published the same week by Asahi Shimbun. Western Scholarship versus Japanese Scholarship. In his article, Haas carves out a dichotomy between Western and Japanese scholarship on the captain, especially in regards to his supposed relationship with the Equal Democracy Party. He explicitly criticizes Japanese academics for being less than willing to delve into the captain's connections with this group. This is typical of the mythicist camp, who dismiss most Japanese scholarship as hopelessly biased due to the stature of Captain Kamino in Japanese culture. This argument, which ignores the prominent tradition of critical examination of the legends that accrued to the captain's name over the following 200 years, reveals the Eurocentric biases of many mythicists. They place Western scholarship, often by scholars who cannot even read Japanese at all, as superior to Japanese scholarship on a Japanese figure. This harkens back to the work of colonialist scholars of the Orient during the 19th century, which presented itself as superior to the people who actually lived in the Orient. Furthermore, Haas does not extend the supposed superiority of Western scholarship to those who disagree with him, such as the aforementioned work of Dr. Depainching. As he cannot argue that those scholars are tainted by growing up with the captain as a beloved cultural icon, he chooses instead to ignore them entirely. This is academic malpractice and renders most of his arguments suspect. Conclusion: a classic case of overreach. While Eric Haas does offer some fair criticisms of Japanese quirk politics, namely the overly restrictive nature of quirk laws, the role of all might in keeping crime rates low, and how the captain's legend has been exploited in the 2 centuries after his death, from the likes of Destro and his quirk supremacist manifesto Meta-Liberation War to the marriage of nationalism and pro-quirk politics in the Equal Democracy Party. However, these criticisms are all undercut by his dishonest scholarship on the issue of Captain Kamino himself. Haas' understandable desire to fight such pressing issues and his ideological enemies leads him to attack what he views as the source of the problem in a classic case of overreach. The existence of Captain Kamino will remain a topic of debate for centuries to come. While I stand firmly in the pro-existence camp, unless the captain himself comes back to life and reveals himself to the world, I admit that his existence cannot be conclusively proven. Furthermore, his actions, beliefs, and ultimate impact will remain topics of academic debate. However, hopefully, the field will be better served than by the likes of Eric Haas. Check out my Discord for fan art, writing workshops, fanfic drafts, art and writing contests, and more. Yurako was impressed with the confidence he exuded. Her teeth dug into her bottom lip. How she envied his ability to take control of the worst of situations. It inspired her. If only she could have a spark of that. But she was just starting out as a professional hero with only a few battles under her belt. What would someone like him find interesting about someone like her? She nearly gasped as he stepped out of the river. Water dribbled down his rock-hard abs, emphasizing the muscles in his shoulders and chest. His long blonde hair whipped back and forth, no longer confined by his signature helmet. His chiseled features made her want to swoon. His fiery gaze met her own. Stains of pink appeared on her cheeks. How was she ever going to survive being roommates with him? Galaxy-chan. 23XX. Beyond Beautiful, plus Ultra. Real person fanfiction. Captain Kamino original female character. Archive of Our Own, May 25th. https. archiveoforon.org works 243762001. To say Izuku was confused would be the understatement of the century. The look on these men's faces were strange enough as it was. Their words even more so, but nothing could have prepared him for their explanation as to why. Why oh why indeed? His jaw tightened as each sentence passed. Grief and disbelief clouded his features. His thoughts drew inward, percolating over this newfound information. So much had happened since he'd been gone. The way they spoke of the captain and his role in this future made his stomach roll and twist around most uncomfortably. Izuku bit down on his inner cheek. If he hadn't gone through what happened earlier, he would be reluctant to believe these strangers. For more than a year he had played the part his father set out for him, upholding the figure of Captain Kamino to try and bring some semblance of equality. Sure, he didn't have any special abilities like his comrades, but that didn't mean he was any less. Those in the know never treated him as such, although he did wonder if that had more to do with his father than he himself. He didn't do it for popularity or to try and seize power. He did it because someone needed to stand up to the bullies. But this was different. Much different. He could barely wrap his head around it. As if reading his mind, the detective held out his phone for the teen, which Izuku hesitantly accepted. The idea that he was some Japanese war hero seemed too outlandish to be true. And yet, the photos the detective had didn't seem doctored or faked. Hell, he even remembered some of them. His pointer finger swiped through every image. Soon the images were replaced by bits of articles, their contents bringing wide-eyed bewilderment to the teen. Some of it was true, sure, but the rest? He wasn't this person they revered. He didn't even do half the things they were talking about. Punching the Prime Minister of Japan? The government would have filled him with lead bullets before he even reached the first steps of the National Diet building. Overwhelmed, he carefully handed the phone back. He would have laughed if it weren't for the seriousness of the conversation as it veered towards his actions. As if he had ever been in an actual war. He hadn't ever stepped foot on a battlefield, much less led anyone into one. There were fights and break-ins into a few jails, but Izuku was never placed on the front lines. The stand in Kamino had been a one-time thing, something his father had never allowed him to repeat. His lips twitched. Almost. It hadn't even been a day and already the guilt had settled into his chest like an anchor. His hands clenched as he recalled his last mission. So many errors. He mentally kicked himself for going in alone, finally doing something that wasn't part of a script. He so desperately wanted to prove himself, to show his father that he was more than just a face for their movement, that he could fight just as well as the rest of them. That he wasn't the little sickly boy who needed everyone else's help. Hisashi Midoriya was not an easy man to argue against, however. Izuku mentally sighed. If only he had followed his father's instructions. But then, many more people would be dead, wouldn't they? Izuku scratched at the chipped paint of his shield. Outwardly he tried to appear like he was okay, but he knew he was slipping hard. He didn't have the ability to craft masks like his father did. No, he wasn't that strong. His breathing started to become shallow as the panic threatened to overtake him. 300 years. Actually, a little more than 200 going by the exact date, but that was all relative. What mattered was what happened. While he was gone, part of him couldn't get over how people viewed him as some mythical hero. He knew those with meta abilities had welcomed him during the time PRD, but all of Japan? It was hard to imagine. Although, maybe he shouldn't be too shocked. A bitter smile spread across his mouth as he recalled his father's social media campaign. Though not tech-savvy himself, Midoriya Hisashi had enough connections to find the right people for the job. Izuku had been there for the build-up, he just hadn't expected it to pay off as much as it had. He was also pretty sure it was mostly bullshit. Izuku blinked once, twice, trying to put together words, but struggling to find the right ones. Where was his speechwriter when he needed him? 6 feet under, a darker part of his mind replied bitterly, like everyone else he'd ever loved. His bottom lip trembled. Another wave of emotion threatened to overtake him once more, his insecurities rising up like a tsunami of self-hatred. Only by the force of will could he stuff it down again. Izuku knew he couldn't afford to get emotional yet. He had already cried once today. Still, the feelings of loneliness persisted in the back of his mind. As if reading his mind, All Might patted his shoulder, a look of concern in his features. Oh, wow, he had been quiet for quite a while now, hadn't he? Shoot. He inwardly berated himself, frantically searching for something to say. So, Izuku began, coughing into his hand, I'm some sort of historical figure, is that it? He gestured widely to the shield and then himself. As in, like, a good historical figure, not someone bad like Hitler or Stalin? And, of course, he just had to reiterate exactly what they said to him. Oh God, did he always sound this stupid? His cheeks flushed. He should have said something smarter, something distinguished. You are a good person in our books, All Might assured him. A hero if there ever was one. Like Superman then, Izuku postulated. Wait, no, I probably shouldn't compare myself to him, he laughed sheepishly. I'm not that super. Izuku's earlier expression was soon reflected on the two men's faces. They looked to one another as their brows crossed. It was the detective that answered first. Who? You know, Superman. He waited for recognition of the name, but to his surprise there was none. Come on, he's one of the greatest comic book heroes of all time. Okay, I know not everyone is a DC fan. Their movies have always been a sort of hit or miss. What about Iron Man? Spider-Man? Does Marvel Comics ring any bells? Nothing on the men's faces spoke of recognition. Izuku's shoulders slumped as realization dawned. You're kidding me. A lot has changed since you've been gone, All Might tried to placate. I'm certain I can find some of these comics for you if you'd like. Yeah, that would be nice, he mumbled, shoulders drooping in tandem with his mood. The detective tilted his head to the side before giving a short. But if I had to compare you to an historical figure, I would say you're closer to Nobunaga than the others, he gave a weak laugh. There are several books, documentaries, and even a few movies about you. Both adults threw the teen a long look. Izuku's cheeks burned. Based on what they'd told him, he definitely knew he wasn't what they expected. The teen didn't have the heart to be angry with them. He would feel the same. Just goes to show you should never meet your heroes, he thought in a melancholic manner. He drummed his fingers across the shield, lips pulling into a tight line as his past actions reflected in the back of his mind. While this is all very relieving news, Izuku said after a spell. Technically, according to the Japanese government, I'm a terrorist. I mean, I got support from those with powers, but the majority of Japan is. All Might started before the detective had the chance. Quirked. I'm sorry. It's what we call meta-users now. What All Might is trying to say is that the majority of Japan have powers now, including the Japanese government. His mind ground to a halt. You mean it became, people are? The teen let out a soft, oh, as he slid out of the hospital bed. He gently placed the shield on the top of the covers. Though his muscles ached from disuse, he continued towards the window. The adults in the room got up from their seats, though neither made another move toward him. Izuku unlocked the window latch, lifting it upward with a soft whoosh. All Might is the first to break the awkward silence. Young Midoriya, is everything all right? You seem pale. Just give me a moment, the boy replied lightly. A cool spring wind brushed through his hair. For a small personal moment he savored the feeling. When he'd left yesterday, or rather, 3 centuries ago, it had been a cold winter, only a few weeks before New Year's. Back then he'd been so focused on completing the mission that he hadn't really thought of what would happen later on. Now, in the future, the figure his father had built up had taken on a mind of its own, becoming something Izuku could never have dreamed of nor ever hoped to become. He took a deep breath. Anxiety over the mission, guilt over the deaths he'd inadvertently caused, and the deep sense of regret all washed over him at the same time. It drowned out the small sense of pleasure he'd felt at the visuals. A long quiet second passed. He screamed. The sound pierced the hospital courtyard, birds flying in every direction at the sound. His throat burned, but he didn't stop until he ran out of breath. Throat sore and mind cleared, he quickly shut the window with a sharp click. Okay, I'm good now, Izuku stated. Truthfully, he could be better, but the yell did release some of the pent-up stress. All Might did not look convinced at his answer. Is that right? Perhaps he shouldn't have screamed out of a hospital room window. Embarrassment settled in his gut. Oh God, he must look like some insane weirdo right now. Izuku folded his arms, hands tightening around the fabric of the hospital shirt. Is it all right if we continue? The detective asked. I'd like to ask you a few more questions if you don't mind. Izuku gave a half-hearted nod. He returned to the bed, seating on top of the covers as he tried to get situated. This shouldn't be too bad. He had answered questions earlier and done all right. The next few minutes made him regret that decision. Another round of embarrassment hit him like a freight train as the detective delivered a barrage of questions. Izuku mentally pictured a dying flower as the older man's initial fascination gave way to the sad realization that Captain Kamino could not, in fact, fight off an army with one punch. Nor had he kicked down steel walls or rescued hundreds of quirk children in one fell swoop. The serum enhanced a lot, but it didn't make him this Herculean hero they knew him by. Sure, he had been involved in several events, but only as a minor actor and certainly not without a team of people under his father's supervision. Well, except that time. It was just his luck that the detective chose to bring it up in his next question. And the stand in Kamino? Detective Tsukachi inquired, lifting his head from his notes. Was that real? Izuku scratched at his temple. In what way? History says you faced off against the military. Izuku mulled over his answer. The truth, the real truth of how he had come across that event, was incredibly embarrassing and only his immediate family knew. So instead he settled on a partial answer. I mean, there were some JSDF members there, but most of the forces were local police. The Japanese government didn't start sending out their peacekeepers in full force until later, after the Great Panic. Izuku glanced down at his shield. It's weird that I never imagined my actions would have had this much of an impact. No one thinks about their place in history as it's happening, Detective Tsukachi remarked. No kidding. Izuku spared a glance at his feet. Despite all its similarities to the past, Japan had changed a lot. All I wanted to do was help. Now, he sighed, eyes downcast. What do I do now that everything's gone? Everything he'd been fighting against no longer existed. Not aware of it, he rubbed his forearms, jaw tightening as he couldn't help but wonder, what's next? His family is dead. Everyone from his time was dust in the wind. So where did that put him? For now, you should rest, the detective assured. You've been through a lot today. But there's so much I want to know, Izuku admitted. I don't think Detective Tsukachi would mind if you used his phone for a bit, would he? All Might interjected. Not at all. I need to step out for a bit anyway. If anyone calls, just let it go to voicemail, he said as he handed the phone to the teen, leaving seconds later in a manner that made Izuku contemplative. His thumb brushed against the reflective surface of the cell. Loneliness was nothing new to Izuku, but there had always been something to fall back on. Mom, Dad, Uncle, even during his darkest days, they had been there for him. How was he supposed to live in this strange world that no longer needed him? He brought his legs up to his chest, moving the shield to the opposite side. Where earlier it delivered comfort, now all it seemed to do was zap his warmth. All Might, can I ask you something? He asked softly. The older male blinked, a big smile dressing his face as he answered, anything. What's going to happen to me? The response did little to soothe the teen's nerves. Night marched over the skyline like an unrelenting army, bringing with it the last chills of winter. His lips pulled into a grim line. It reminded him of his impending end as the symbol of peace. The words of his sidekick fumbled through his mind. He shook his head to dislodge them. He had already accepted his death. He would find a successor when the time came. Everyone for all users before him had. The hospital grounds were empty of visitors and staff alike. Not that Yagi minded. This side of the building gave a clear view of the entrance and the surrounding area, slightly elevated a few meters up with a guardrail to keep out any trespassers. It wasn't large by any means, but as one of the few smoking areas there, it did its job. It didn't take Yagi long to find his friend. Just as he was about to call out for the other, a series of coughs racked his chest, alerting the detective of his presence. So much for a smooth entrance. The hacking of blood might disturb some, but thankfully not Tsukachi. He took a few steps forward, both hands stuffed into his pockets as he asked, "Mind if I join you?" Tsukachi shrugged in response, taking a long drag of his cigarette. He motioned his box to the man who swiftly declined. "Can't. Only one lung, remember?" Though he never smoked before, a small part of him wished he could have the choice. A lot of things were now off limits to his body these days. Medications and surgeries kept him alive, but whether one could call this living was debatable. A long sigh left his mouth. Cynicism had embedded itself deep in Yagi's psyche these days, despite his outward cheerful persona. Tsukachi waved his cigarette in the air, soft plumes of smoke trailing behind. "How's the kid doing?" "As well as one can be," Yagi replied. "And you?" A loaded question if there ever was one. He leaned back against the wall, lifting his hands so as to tent them beneath his chin. Through closed eyes he confessed, "Can't believe my childhood hero turned out to be a child soldier." While no longer the rabbit fan he was in his youth, Yagi had long admired the symbol of Hope's accomplishments, using the man as a basis for his own hero journey. To find out most of it was made up was disheartening to say the least. Not to say young Midoriya's achievements weren't amazing in and of themselves. He was without a doubt impressed and thankful for what he had done for their society. Young Midoriya was a kind boy. A scared one too. His hands formed fists on what the poor kid had to go through. No one should have placed a child in that position in the first place. The detective lifted a brow, flicking the ashes away from him. "Technically, all of you are child soldiers," Tsukachi stated in a matter-of-fact tone, dark eyes locking with Yagi's. He resisted the urge to shudder. The detective's gaze was a piercing thing, unrelenting in its quest for answers. Whether it was due to his quirk or not, Yagi couldn't say. You start training at a young age and are out fighting villains before you've even reached adulthood. Just replace the word military with hero schools and there you go. Yagi barked a laugh, copper-coating his tongue. "I can see your opinion of hero schools hasn't changed. It's not just hero schools, Toshinori. It's this entire society." He held his shaking head. "God, this is insanity. The entire Japanese hero system is built on a bunch of lies." Then young Midoriya truly is the captain. Confusion danced across his friend's brow. "You didn't think so before?" Yagi gestured nervously, trying to cover up his embarrassment. "I just wanted to check again. None of this feels real." The detective tossed his arms out, gesturing openly as he said in a dry tone, "Imagine the headlines. Symbol of hope is a child." The media would go nuts. "Which is why they're not going to find out," Yagi responded. His jaw tightened, one hand brandishing a fist as he looked to the sky. "Not unless young Midoriya allows it." The boy had enough on his plate as it was. He already lost everything. To place him under the media spotlight would be cruel. "It might not be up to him," Tsukachi commented. His brow furrowed. "You're going to tell your superiors then?" Tsukachi lifted a brow, incredulousness oozing off him in waves. "All Might, I came here to help you out as a friend, not a cop," he retorted, folding his arms. "I'm simply stating the facts. There are videos out now. We could do something about young Midoriya's appearance in the meantime, to keep him off the radar." He postulated, "I could go to the store and get something to change his hair color." "A simple dye job won't fool anyone," he scoffed. Tsukachi took a small puff of his cigarette, adding, "All Might, why do you care so much about this kid? Other than the fact that he's the captain, that is. You don't even know him." His thoughts filtered back to their meeting hours earlier. The question hammered at him. Why didn't he just take the boy to the proper authorities? "I suppose," he said after a moment's pause. It was his expression. He was so lost and scared. He needed a hero. Still needs one. "You and your big heart are something else. I guess that's why you're the symbol of peace for us." An amused smile passed over his friend's face before disappearing as he took another inhale of the nicotine. His head. People gave him far too much credit at times. He was certain if any other hero had come across the boy they would have done the same. Well, he thought wryly to what happened this morning, most of them. Another question popped into his mind. With knowledge of his friend's profession, he inquired, "What do you think about the truck he escaped from? Think we'll find any clues as to how young Midoriya came to us?" "Doubtful. It was a private ambulance. Going by the plates, I'd say it was a stolen rental. If I had to guess, the top brass will be scratching their heads for quite a while before moving on to the next crazy son of a gun. So long as the captain keeps his head low, he should be safe. This has science fiction written all over it," he mumbled beneath his breath. "Who on earth would resurrect the captain? And for what purpose?" Good question. Not a lot of people would have the sort of manpower and money to do so. There was something in Tsukachi's tone that prompted Yagi to prod further. "But you have an idea of who it might be?" He shrugged. "I've heard rumors about the commission." Yagi resisted the urge to roll his eyes. The Hero Public Safety Commission was a benevolent force, most of the time. Regulation was important after all, though he couldn't say he agreed with all their policies. There are more rumors about them than there are people in the world. Perhaps you could be a bit more specific, Yagi stated. The Hero Public Safety Commission has always been understaffed, now more than ever. His gaze sharpened as he continued, a little birdie mentioned to me that they were interested in getting a slice of the hero cake, so to speak. They're already in the hero industry. They're a part of the hero industry, he corrected, motioning his cigarette like a pointer finger. A regulating body doesn't get the same freedoms and money a singular hero might from advertising deals. That might change if they raise up one of their own. Yagi scratched his chin. A hero crafted by the commission would prove troublesome indeed. Loyalty to a singular organization would create doubt on a pro-hero's ability to be impartial. A short pause passed between them before Yagi asked, "Can I be honest with you, detective?" "Of course." This all sounds rather far-fetched. He would have said bullcrap but felt his friend deserved a bit more tact on his part. "It's why I said it was rumors," Tsukachi said, raising his hands as if to wave off the speculation. "Nothing more." Yagi got up off the wall, groaning as his back popped. He wouldn't be able to do more than an hour more of All Might today at this rate. "I miss the days when heroics wasn't a popularity contest but a way to keep people safe. Times have changed. People get complacent during peace times." Yagi's gaze traveled past the small courtyard to the street. People and cars filtered through the traffic, their voices a soft buzz amongst the quiet rustling of decorative trees above them. How soon people forget what the world was like in his youth, the dangers people faced when heroes weren't so spread out across major cities. It seemed like every small town had one now. He wondered, was that due to his work or simply the trend of heroes becoming so favorable in Japanese society? His mind traveled back to the young teen in the hospital room. A flash of worry filled his chest. "What's going to happen to him?" he whispered. "Midoriya?" Tsukachi's lips drew into a thin line. "He'll need a guardian to take care of him. He's too young to be left on his own." "We can't leave him in the foster care system," Yagi stated, voice stern. As a former ward of the government, he had spent more than a few years shuffled between one home to the next. There were good families, but he had more of his fair share of bad ones too. Young Midoriya needed stability. Tsukachi leaned to the side, suspicious eyes traveling upwards to meet Yagi's. "What do you suggest we do?" "Well, why not you?" "Me?" he sputtered. "Are you nuts? I live in a studio apartment. I can't even keep a pet, much less a teenager." The shorter man took 2 long drags of his cigarette at even the mention. "Why not you?" "It would draw scrutiny if All Might took in an unknown child," he pointed out. Tsukachi looked pensive. Eyes widening, he proposed, "Who says it has to be All Might?" He elbowed the man softly. "Maybe he has someone he trusts who could take him. Someone who works under him." Yagi didn't have a second to think about the question before a new problem arose. His eyes zeroed in on the hospital entrance as a familiar face stepped out of a limousine, followed by a small entourage of guards. The fast-moving blur in the sky added to his suspicions. "We've got company." "Huh." He motioned his head towards them. The detective dropped his cigarette. "Is that who I think it is?" he whispered. "Looks like your rumors might prove to be correct, detective," he replied, turning back towards the hospital. He could hear Tsukachi stomp on the burning cigarette as he walked away, grumbling, "I'm beginning to hate it when I'm right." Hero Society, for all its talk of good behavior and doing the right thing, were a bunch of busybodies through and through. Maybe it hadn't always been this way, but it certainly was now. When rankings determined one's salary and advertising deals, a pro had to stay on top of his or her game or else lose their spot in an already oversaturated field. The trends, the media, what was in fashion, what was out of fashion, the civilian saves versus property damage statistics, being in the know was vital. Hawks prided himself in his ability to keep up with it all. Or perhaps he simply enjoyed the latest scandal. More than one person had deemed him an attention-whore, and he'd be dead if he didn't live up to that while portraying the careful, jovial nature the public knew him as. Reputation was everything for their line of work. That was not to say Hawks became a hero. For popularity. No, his priorities were simple. To make a world where heroes had time to kill because come on, who wanted to spend every day in one fight or another? Certainly not him. Of course, as often as he kept track of the latest trends, even he could not predict the number 2 hero's brutal takedown. There was no doubt in his mind Endeavor's popularity would take a hit from this, a fact which troubled him, though not for long. He knew the hero would bounce back. Eventually. Endeavor was no slouch. He would work twice as hard as before to regain the public's trust in him and reach once more for that coveted top spot despite its current occupant, something Hawks greatly admired. Right now, though, he was the subject of many hilarious memes that Hawks saved on his phone. For research purposes, of course. But he was getting ahead of himself. As he swooped down onto the window's ledge, he couldn't help but inwardly giggle at the ridiculousness of it all. The call from the commission was unsurprising. He was on their speed dial, after all. However, the message contained certainly threw him for a loop. To think, the little cosplayer might actually be the real deal. If Hawks were obsessed with money, he would have sold the news to the highest bidder. But Hawks had no interest in tipping Japanese society into chaos. He wanted an easy life for all heroes after all. Throwing Captain Kiddo to the wolves wouldn't do them any favors. Lady Luck and a keen eye got him here in record time. A normal person would take the door. Hawks, on the other hand, wanted to make an entrance, and what better way than through the window? He made the landing well enough, wings gliding him down until his feet gripped the sill. With one swift pull he yanked the window open, alerting the occupant. He whistled, putting on a friendly face as he thought of what sort of greeting to use. Something calming but still hip enough that he didn't come off as a creep perhaps? He thought of several possible lines before settling on the simplest. Sup. The first thought that came to Hawk's mind at the boy's appearance was plain. Extraordinarily so. He looked more akin to a dandelion than a first-generation hero. The shock on the teen's face made him appear all the more average. The videos and photos had been pretty blurry, but he had expected the symbol of hope to have something striking about his appearance at least. But no, Cap was just some flimsy kid who probably caught Endeavor off guard if anything. Talk about disappointment. He rolled his shoulders, feathers ruffling as he hopped inside. So, he began, eyes roaming the teen. You're supposed to be the captain. You know, you're a lot shorter than I expected. Oops. He didn't have time for a second thought or even a third. A flash of metal was his only warning as he dived for the floor, the shield bouncing off the place where his head was moments earlier. His eyes widened at the indent it produced. Talk about poor reception. Hawks waved his hands, putting on his best apologetic expression. Whoa! Time out. The captain caught the shield as it returned to his hand, eyeing Hawks with a harsh glare. Who are you and what are you doing in my room? How fascinating. The scared kid he saw earlier melted away, replaced with a steely, if nervous gaze. He adjusted his stance. He could see how a person could be caught off guard. Good thing he came prepared. He tilted his head to the side, eyes narrowed playfully. Geez, you throw this thing at every person you meet? Now, why don't we sit down and, not the face? The kid struck hard. Then, what was that thing made of? Hawks avoided the second hit, launching himself into the air as he flung feathers at the teen who blocked the assault with his shield. Hawks hid his surprise with a laugh. You're not going to make this easy, are you? He teased. Hawks inwardly cursed as the teen made a running jump. He brought his wings together to shield against another hit but felt the vibrations in the air shift above him. Oh. Now, this was getting fun. On your left, the boy cheekily announced, fist nearly catching Hawks' cheek. If Hawks weren't the professional he had trained himself to be, the move might have caught him off guard. Years of practice shined through, however, as he caught the teen's second punch. A quick JRK tossed the shield to the side. Before the boy could react, he twisted in midair, using the momentum to launch the boy across the room. The kid hit the wall with a soft thud, a low groan alerting him that he should probably put an end to this. You're one slippery kid, I'll give you that. He placed his hands up as a sign of peace. Truce? No use fighting when both of us are on the same side, right? Same side. Exactly. I'm not here to hurt you. The captain sent him a dubious look. Could have fooled me. He walked on over, throwing out a hand as he apologized. My bad, bro. But you were the one who attacked first. You are the one who snuck into my room, the boy pointed out, taking the offered hand after a moment's hesitation. I don't even know who you are. Oh yeah, introductions. Hawks, ever the performer, threw out his wings, feathers dancing through the air as he proclaimed, the name is Hawks, the wing hero. At your service. The boy nodded, mumbling, Izuku Midoriya. His attention shifted to his floating feathers. Are you controlling these? Cool, right? The kid's face lit up like a Christmas tree. Any distrust disappeared as he picked up the one closest to him, analyzing it before grabbing the next one and the next. And if they're connected to you physically as well, does that mean you can feel them when they're touched? Though that would mean that other possible sensations could be felt as well. But to carry a human's body weight seems impossible. Unless, could the bones be hollow? Possibly. That doesn't account for how you move in the air though. He gestured Hawk's feather in the air whilst he grabbed another one, soon accumulating a sizable armful. Or perhaps it's the telekinesis of the feathers themselves holding up the weight, which makes more sense considering how they can move back and forth between the air and the body. Where do they anchor though? Wouldn't you need a second set of shoulders and pectoral muscles to get them to move? He walked around Hawks, face way too close for Hawk's liking. Did this kid know anything about personal space? They don't seem like a true bird's wings. Their anchor points aren't very large either for someone who can fly, which means each must be controlled by you directly, right? How many feathers do you need to float? You're kind of a creepy kid, he commented, motioning a hand at all of his feathers in the teen's arms now. Midoriya comically dropped them, apologizing incessantly as they returned to Hawk's back. What a turn of events. One moment the kid was ready to throw down and the next he was harping excitedly about Hawk's quirk. Alas, his fun was cut short by the door clicking open, the real reason he was here, giving the room a look-see before settling on Hawks with an unimpressed glare. Hawks, the head of the Hero Public Safety Commission, began, her voice light and sweet, opposite of the look in her eyes. What a surprise. I thought I told you to meet us downstairs. There were several things Hawks could answer with, but he did have an image to uphold. Shifting his head sideways, he lifted his arms as if to shrug, replying, whoops. My bad. Suffice to say, he might be put in time out after this. Here's a link to my Discord if you'd like to discuss the FIC, see fan art, get fanfic recs, and more.